I think this is where it gets to like based liberal fascism of like, you know what, child, your parents may not be a part of the nation,
I don't know about
but
fascism.
you don't.
That's a weird word.
But you don't have responsibility to your family. Your first responsibility is to the American nation. If a child is born to a legal,
I would extend the citizenship to their parents too if they were able to pass certain checks and tests and things. Like,
that's a complete 180 from what you said at the beginning of the debate, which is about because you hold on. You cited very specifically at the beginning of the debate that it would be a problem because it does not provide an easier path to citizenship to the parents. You literally said, well, they have to wait till the child's 18. It won't be a problem. And now
I was addressing the concern of anchor babies. To
okay,
be clear,
but then
I said that concern could be addressed other ways, and it doesn't exacerbate that concern.
But Wick, your own stated policy objective that you just cited is actually going to perpetuate and make worse the issue of anchor babies.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. I am Sarah, the Raging Tomato, bringing to you live another big debate between Wick TV and Kai Schwemmer here for his first time. Welcome, my friend, and welcome back, Wick. Tonight, the gentlemen will be debating, should the U.S. allow birthright citizenship? Wick, if you'd like to begin with your opening statement, please.
Certainly. My position tonight is that the United States should have birthright citizenship, not merely because it's the law, though it is, not merely because it's constitutionally rooted, though it is, but because it is the correct rule for the kind of country America should be. At its core, birthright citizenship answers one simple question: what do we do with the children born here? Not what do we think of their parents, not whether our immigration system is broken, not whether border enforcement should be stronger. These are real debates, but they are separate debates. The question here is whether a child born in the United States, raised under American law, shaped by American schools, American language, American culture, American obligations, and American civic life should be told, you are not really one of us. My answer is no. The strongest moral argument for birthright citizenship is that children should not inherit the sins of their fathers. If someone enters the country unlawfully, enforce the law against that adult. If someone overstays a visa, deal with that visa overstay. If an asylum law is being abused, reform asylum law. If people are exploiting tourist visas to give birth here, crack down on visa fraud and false statements. But a newborn has broken no law. A baby does not choose where its parents crossed, what paperwork they had, what visa expired, or what motives their parents had. Ending birthright citizenship says the legal status or conduct of the parent stains the child from the moment of birth. It creates inherited outsider status. It says your belonging is not based on your own life, your own country, your own relationship to the society you're born into, but on the status of your parents. That is not immigration enforcement. That is hereditary punishment. And I think that is profoundly un-American. America should not be a caste system. We should not have one child born in a hospital in Texas who is fully American because his parents had the right documents, and another child born in the same hospital, subject to the same laws, raised in the same neighborhoods, saying the same pledge in the same schools, who is told, you are something lesser. You are here, but not of here. That is a dangerous thing for a country to do, because ending birthright citizenship does not make these children disappear. They will still be born here. They will still grow up here. They'll still go to school here. They'll still speak our language, watch our media, work in our economy, and live in our communities. The only difference is that we would have chosen to build a country inside the country, a class of people physically present, culturally American, socially American, but legally alienated from the nation around them. That is a recipe for permanent division. Now, I understand the objections people raise. I get it. They say, what about anchor babies? Or what about birth tourism? But those concerns do not require ending birthright citizenship. First, and I think we should start here, the phrase anchor baby is misleading. A child born here does not magically legalize the parents. A U.S. citizen child cannot sponsor parents for lawful permanent residence until adulthood. And even then, immigration bars can still apply. So if the concern is that parents are using a child as an instant shield, that is mostly not how the system works. Second, if the concern is birth tourism, then target birth tourism. If someone lies on a visa application, prosecute visa fraud. If a business sells fraudulent birth tourism packages, shut it down. If consular officers suspect someone is coming only to give birth at a public expense, tighten visa screening. If hospitals are being left with unpaid bills, improve collection rules or require proof of payment arrangements for certain temporary visitors. There are many ways to address abuse without rewriting the citizenship status of every child born here. And that distinction matters. You do not burn down the principle because some people abuse the edges. You enforce the rules at the point of abuse. The abuse is adult conduct: fraud, unlawful entry, overstays, evasions, exploitation of the visa system. So address the adult conduct. Don't punish the child. If we're serious when we say we want immigrants to assimilate, birthright citizenship helps us with that. Assimilation is not just something immigrants do, it's something the country makes possible. You cannot tell people, become part of America, while also telling their children, no matter where you were born, no matter how thoroughly this country shapes you, you still do not fully belong. Birthright citizenship creates a clear path of belonging. It says your parents may have come from somewhere else, but you were born here. Your obligations are here. Your future is here. And this country claims you. That gives people a stake in the national project. It binds them to America instead of leaving them in a permanent waiting room. If you want assimilation, you should want clarity. You should want people born here to understand that this is their country, not some place they are merely allowed to linger in. A nation gets more loyalty by claiming its children than by rejecting them. There is also a national interest argument here. America can, frankly, use more citizens. We're an aging country. We need workers, taxpayers, entrepreneurs, soldiers, builders, caregivers, inventors, and most of all, families. We need people with a stake in the future of our country. A child born here is not a threat by default. That child has potential. That child can grow up to serve, work, build, pay taxes, start businesses, raise families of their own, and contribute to the American project. It is strange to look at a newborn and see a liability first, or a threat. A confident nation looks at children born inside its borders and sees future citizens, future contributors, future Americans. And finally, now that birthright citizenship has been the American rule for generations, changing it would not be a minor policy adjustment. It would be a fundamental shift in what citizenship means. We have built our systems, expectations, civic identity, all of this around the idea that America is not a bloodline nation. You do not need the right and ancestry to be born American. You do not need your parents to pass some purity test. If you're born here and subject to our laws, you belong here. Once a country has spent generations telling people, if you're born here, you're one of us, ripping that away is not reform. It is a retreat from civic nationhood into inherited status. So yes, I support birthright citizenship. I support it because it is stable. I support it because it encourages assimilation. I support it because America benefits from more people who are fully invested in this country. But most of all, I support it because children should not inherit exclusion. Enforce immigration laws against adults where appropriate. Crack down on visa fraud. Go after birth tourism schemes. Fix asylum if it's broken. Secure the border if that's your thing. But do not solve adult political failures by creating a class of American-born children who are told from birth that they do not belong. Country should not manufacture outsiders out of the people born inside it. Birthright citizenship prevents that, and that is why it's not just the law, it's the right law.
Thank you so much, Wick. And Kai, over to you for your opening statement, please.
Terrific. Well, hey, thank you so much, Wick, for the opening statement. Thank you so much, Sarah, for having me. I want to take an interesting kind of dive into this issue of birthright citizenship, and I am staunchly in favor of its repeal and in alignment with the majority of the Western world to a policy rooted in the principle of jus sanguinis as opposed to jus soli, which is the citizenship extended through blood versus citizenship extended through soil. I think people, when we put them up to a couple tests of intuition, realize the basic fact, and it's interesting to hear that Wick has perhaps gone in the contrary direction, that individuals owe an allegiance, especially when they are born, primarily to their parents, and that allegiance is one that is extended oftentimes by their parents. this conversation obviously is going to center around a very specific group of individuals who, at least temporarily, are residing in the United States of America. Those are individuals who have immigrated here illegally, who are still, under the status quo, being granted citizenship, or their children, rather, are being granted citizenship in the status quo, despite the fact that their parents did something which broke a very important contract in crossing over to this nation to begin with. And I think this is where this conversation needs to begin. In order for a contract to truly be affirmed on solid ground, it matters a whole lot the means by which one enters the contract. If one is compelled into entry, if one is duped, if one is deceived, then obviously the contract becomes almost a fruit of a poisonous tree. It becomes something that has been entered into in an illegitimate way and should not be seen as reasonably legitimate as a contract entered into by two parties who are reasonably consenting to all of the facts and all of the parts of the contract. In the case of illegal immigration, you have individuals who cross illegally into the United States. They violate statutes of our law found in Section 8 of the U.S. Code, and very specifically undermine then the entire legal process, a legal process which, if functioning correctly, could reasonably, yes, extend birthright citizenship to the children of people who have resided here for a long time. Addressing the Constitution, because this is obviously something that comes up. The Supreme Court has never ruled specifically on the issue of, and you know, we'll go over, I'm sure, in this debate, the actual rulings from 1868, the ratification of the 14th Amendment, later on to Wong Kim Ark. Wong Kim Ark, which is kind of the precedent that we work from, stipulated very specifically that a birthright could be provided to the child of two immigrants who, first, were not illegal, and second, had been residing in the nation for several decades. We have not gone back to adjudicate whether or not the child of illegal immigrants has that same right as was provided to Wong Kim Ark. But we do, however, have cases, historically, even post-1868, post-ratification of the 14th Amendment, where birthright citizenship was denied to certain immigrants. A woman had a child, you know, coming over on a boat from Ireland. She was taken to a U.S. hospital, and then the right of the child to become an American citizen, despite the fact that he was born on U.S. soil, was denied him by the government. This communicates to us that there is something more important than the soil upon which you are born. It also, and I love the fact that Wick has brought up the framing of Americanism, the framing of patriotism. It absolutely does undermine what it means to be an American if we believe that we just exist on a magic piece of soil. And I think one of the operative questions that is going to be very important in this debate is the question of the first moments of an individual's life. If a child is born here, they have a citizenship extended to them if their parents are immigrants from a foreign country. In the majority of cases, there is a citizenship that is extended to them. But it is not first American citizenship. It is the citizenship of the country that their parents have resided in for decades of their life, extended to them by the principle of jus soli. There are often fallacies that are parroted or brought up as questions by those who affirm birthright citizenship, the idea that we would be creating stateless citizens. I ask, why has that not been the case? Why is it the case that the majority of the Western world is able to recognize that birthright citizenship in the modern day simply is untenable? I would frame my argument, and I'll close with this, in two ways. First, under a framework of originalism, it seems very clear that automatic birthright extended to the children of illegal immigrants is absolutely not what the framers of the 14th Amendment, those who ratified it, nor the Supreme Court in 98, or the 18... I'm getting all the numbers mixed up. The Wong Kim Ark year, which I believe was 1898, if I'm not mistaken. It seems very clear that that was not the intent of the framers, neither of the 14th Amendment or the Supreme Court on the case, or as they ruled on the case Wong Kim Ark. Furthermore, and this is maybe the idealistic approach that I will take, you know, making a normative claim, it seems the way that our country has developed with the influx of immigrants who have seemingly refused assimilation and who ever, you know, decrease in the amount that they assimilate, their resistance increasing and increasing day by day, year by year, it simply seems untenable that we continue on the path that we are on. Wick and I could even in this debate agree that there is some legal right, or that there has been some legal right of individuals to have citizenship upon birth, even if their parents are illegal immigrants. I don't think that's a good ruling, but we could even agree that that is the case. But my argument would still stand that in today's day and age, it is an absolutely untenable prescription, and the status quo is unworkable. It subjects our politics to a kind of identity politics an appeal to certain ethnic and religious groups that undermines our democratic state, that undermines the values of Americans, and that was never once the express interest of individuals who lived through the ratification process and the century thereafter.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kai. As a kind reminder to the audience, both gentlemen, I believe, are streaming on their end. So please be sure to head over to their channels, like, subscribe, share, and of course, send them all of your money, please. Also, to remind you, we will be getting through the debate. We will move into closing statements. Then we will read and respond to your kind super chats. And then, of course, we will open up the panel. So if you have something to say or a question for either of the gentlemen, you will have your opportunity to jump here on panel and ask it. Gentlemen, I leave the floor open to you.
So, well, first of all, thank you for being here.
Of course.
I don't know if you remember, we talked years ago very briefly.
Absolutely. I was just rewatching a stream where we were on a debate panel together. I do remember. I'm glad you remember. I was going to ask.
I do. I have a good memory for the most part, except for when it comes to dates. So I feel you on that. I think you got this one right? But for me, I'm happy to have the legal debate with you if you'd like, but I think that regardless of whether or not I'm correct on the legal side, I am, or you are, that doesn't answer the question in the debate, right? Because we can believe that laws have been justly decided, but still believe that those laws are incorrect or wrong. Are you with me so far on that?
Yes. Can I add an amendment? I want to see if you agree with me.
An amendment. Okay. Can we ratify? Are we ratifying this amendment? Like,
we'll see. It'll take a 2/3 vote. So, it depends on what Sarah's thinking. Well, what I would say is that we should strive as much as it is possible as we enact policy to enact policy that reflects first, the way that it's being discussed by the officials who are voting on it, right? Like if I'm a legislator and I write some piece of legislation and I tell you it's going to do X thing, you should reasonably expect it to do X thing, and you could be reasonably upset if it does the opposite.
Certainly, I'd agree to that.
Perfect. Then I think for me, that's kind of it gives you an idea of my framing. I think that although it has been the case historically that, obviously if somebody's born here in the United States in the status quo, they have birthright citizenship extended to them. It seems very clear that was not the intent. And it seems very clear, especially in the original Congress that debated the issue, they had serious reservations about how many people this would extend to, and more importantly, and this is the operative word, the gravity, the extent of how many people would be affected by this and how it would shape U.S. policy. Because identity politics and interest politics are a very serious thing to consider when you're arguing in favor of enfranchising people from birth.
I agree with you and your framing, but having read the debate that they had when they were ratifying initially the 14th Amendment, it was clear that many of them understood that if it were to be ratified, that it would extend to the Chinese, to gypsies, as they used at the time. I think the senator from the Pennsylvania, I believe at the time, even voted against it because he understood that if it were ratified, that you would be giving the children of people who had, as he put it, no loyalty to the state or the country. So I would posit that that's evidence that when they were going through it at the time, that they knew that this was going to extend to every person who was born here, except for there was a few exclusions that they put in at the time, right? So they excluded,
and these deal with political allegiance of American Indians,
and there were treaties at the time. It's a whole mess, okay? But they understood that this was to be given to all people, regardless of where they came from. And I think that, the history's clear on this. But again, I don't know if it particularly matters to me, right? I think that at the end of the day, what matters to me is, do we punish children for the sins of the parents? That's the operative question here, because you're right. There is an illegal immigrant problem in America, but I would never punish the child of a thief because their parents stole. I would never punish the child of a murderer. Well, let me finish. Because their parents committed murder. Why would I punish the child of an illegal immigrant because they came in across a border wrong? That seems immoral to me as a just as a start.
Yeah. So, I mean, we do. I mean, there's plenty of. I want to get into that actually in a second. So maybe I table
Can you
that.
explain?
I want to. I just want to make sure that I don't get past one of the first things that you mentioned. My conflict here, and the conflict in the Congress, is not so much about what kind of person birthright citizenship would be extended to. It's more so about, again, the gravity and the extent. And this seems to be the case on the issue of immigration historically, time and time again, and why I think it's so important to repeal birthright citizenship. We see that every single time this seems to be put up to a vote, whether it's in the 80s with Reagan, whether it's in 65 with the Hart-Celler Act, whether it's earlier, it seems that immigration restriction is the will of the people and the will of the Congress, but the effect of policy passed, whether it's Reagan's amnesty, whether it's the Hart-Celler bill, which we were told would not have a significant effect on U.S. demographics or on U.S. culture, or whether it's earlier, right, with birthright citizenship. It is very clear to see that the implementation causes an effect that was not the desired intent of the people who were actually debating it, which is why even the most liberal proponents of birthright citizenship in the Congress in 1868, and bear with me, if I take a second, I should be able to find it in the Congressional Globe. And if you have the specific part, let me know as well, because I've been going back and forth.
It's a huge document. I don't have the specific quotes, man.
It's huge. I'm not asking you like to have that on the tip of your fingers.
Sure.
I really should have it here, and I had it earlier, but like you said, it's a huge document. Just flipping through it, I've lost my point. But what is very interesting here for me is that even the most liberal proponents of birthright citizenship, when they discuss, for instance, the immigration of the Chinese, and you're right to mention as well, there were others who, I forget where it was, Maryland or something, that had a particular problem with gypsies. Of course, like in Utah or California, Pennsylvania, that's what it was. Yeah. These are particular issues in particular states. California, of course, had a mass influx of Chinese immigrants. But when you hear the liberal representative from California discuss the issue, and this is what's interesting, he discusses it applying when he says, there should be no reason that we reject this proposal. There should be no reason for being against it, which would extend birthright citizenship to scores of individuals. What is the quantity of a score? If I'm not mistaken, this is a numeral of 20. He's not discussing millions of people. He's not even discussing hundreds of thousands. He's discussing scores of people. His perception is not that the United States would shift, but rather as he explains Chinese immigration to California, he even says something which to me reading it was really hilarious. He believed that whether dead or alive, their bones would return to China. That's the language that he used. So we're not thinking about individuals who are coming here and staying, but we are talking about individuals who are either dead, their bodies are being shipped back to China, or they are alive going back to China before they die. This obviously seems to be the perception of the Congress, even among its most liberal proponents.
So, again, I would just like to point out that my question was never answered. I asked you, should we punish the children of parents who break the law, right? And that would, because that's the
yes.
Like, I understand your argument is such that at the time, they did not understand the ultimate implication and how this would expand to much more of a problem than they thought that it might be. I understand that. I disagree. I think you're load-bearing term of score. Can I finish?
Yeah.
The load-bearing word that you're using, like scores, meant like 20. So he's saying scores. He was obviously speaking a little more colloquially. He wasn't referencing specific amounts.
I disagree.
That's
I
just
completely
obvious
disagree
from the text.
I completely disagree.
That aside. I think that again, it's a moral question for me more than a legal question, and the moral question again rides on that specific thing. Should we punish the children of parents who come here illegally? And I say no. And that's where I rest my first principle of this argument, and most of it kind of trickles down from there. So I'd really like the answer to your question, answer to this question, just a direct answer, please. Like, should we punish the children of people who commit crime? I say no.
So I don't think, and I don't mean to be like slippery about this. You're upset that
You're being slippery about this.
Well, if you'll let me finish, I'll explain exactly why I think you're actually being slippery. The way we started this debate was with this important amendment, and I set out very clearly that it is important to analyze what was the intent. You and I both agreed that if there is a stated intent that is completely different in implementation, that's probably something that we should avoid, and to the extent that we have seen that the implementation has created some completely opposite result of what was being said as the legislation was being voted on, we should probably seek to remedy that legislatively. But then in an attempt to kind of dodge that first part of the conversation, you said, well, you didn't answer my second question. Well, I said, if you recall just about 5 minutes ago in the debate, I said, I want to get to that second question, and it is half of the document that I've wrote up about this debate.
You say you want to get to it.
Let him finish. Let's let him finish at least.
I think the fact that you think that that's slippery means that you don't want to engage with my first contention. I'm more than happy to move on to the second the moment you have begun to account for the first. But as of yet, hold on. As of yet, all you've said is that, well, scores doesn't actually mean scores. I don't know how you figured that other than vibes. And then the second thing is you said, well, it's not super important what the Congress is actually saying because I'm more concerned about my other contention, which you didn't answer. Well, I didn't answer your second contention because you haven't given me an answer for the first. That's not slippery. It's just making sure that we get our ducks in a row before we move on in the debate.
But I did answer the first, and I provided a very specific example of the senator from Pennsylvania who acknowledged that at the time, if I may finish, who acknowledged at the time that it would extend to people that he did not want it to extend to, such as gypsies and etc. And that's why he voted against it, because that understanding was there, thus addressing the point that you were making onto the intent of the thing. You might not agree with my conclusion, but I leave that to the audience to decide. And this is why I say you're slippery, is because having addressed that, you simply say and turn around and pretend that I have not. And I asked a very simple, very direct question that you have yet to address, and I'd like you to do so if we can.
Well, Wick, do you remember what my response was to what you said concerning the senator?
In a second.
No, that wasn't my response. My response was, well, I don't think that the quality of the individuals, the kind of individual, like their ethnicity, matters. What matters is the amount, because the amount is the thing that the Congress was talking about. All of them basically agreed, and actually, you're right, the senator that we're discussing, Senator Howard, he didn't agree even about the kind of individuals. But the majority of the Congress agreed, okay, yeah, this can be extended to basically anybody. They weren't, however, talking about millions of people. And so those are two functionally different questions. A question of kind of person and a question of amount of people are functionally different and have very different policy implications. So my argument is that the Congress did not expect millions of people to come here and take advantage of that system that they were creating. And to the extent that they did not expect that they were not in favor of it, we should be reasonably allowed to go back and say, hey, the policy has not reflected the actual will of the people who drafted it, and we should be able to undo it because it's had this adverse effect.
Sure. Can you show me a quote or a statement in the discussion that they had where they mentioned that, well, if it gets where it's too many people, like if it crosses a certain threshold of numbers, then we would not be okay with it? Can you show me anything like that? Or is this just something you're inserting into it?
No. Like, that's why I cited the very specific examples from the Congressional Globe, from the actual debate, both of the liberal proponent of birthright citizenship from California in his discussion of first the amount of people and then second the kind of immigration that was occurring.
Do you know what I just asked? Can you repeat my question?
Yeah, absolutely. If I can cite specific examples from the debate that point out that they're talking about quantity and that quantity is a concern of theirs.
That's not my that if it passed a certain threshold that they would.
Well, that's quantity, right? Like threshold is quantity.
Can you cite those examples?
Well, I did. You just, but the problem is.
But no, what you cited was that he understood that it would be extending to scores, whatever that means.
That is
right?
numerical.
Whether it be specific or whether it be a more colloquial statement. But that does not address the point that I was asking you, which is there a threshold that he was citing where if it was more than scores, right? If it was scores upon scores upon scores, millions, as you say, that he would be like, okay, maybe we should tone this down. Can you cite me anything like that?
Yeah, let me see if I can pull it up from the Congressional Globe
and
itself.
I just want to, as you're looking, I just want to remind the audience that my very simple question he's continually running from of should we punish the children for the sins of their parents? It's a very simple question.
Wick, like in the most sincere way possible,
go ahead.
I don't think anybody perceives me trying to address one point before we get off to the second as an attempt to run. It's simply the way that you do a debate. Is you address one point and then you can get to the next. Okay. And by the way, if you could help, because I think it's good if we have both of us have the Congressional Globe pulled up in front of us.
I don't have to help you make your argument.
No, I'm not asking you to. Hold on. It's not making my argument. The congressional record is what it is. You know, it's not as if it's a pro or against draft. It's just the arguments of the Congress. You don't have to make my argument for me. You're just helping me because this is, I mean, we both agree that this is the debate the Congress had, right?
This is a debate that Congress had,
and you've cited that very debate as well as I have, right? So why are you hesitant to pull up the thing that we're both citing?
Because
why do you think that would help my debate?
I think it exists. I can't find something that's not there.
So you then are saying that there was not a discussion of the amount of immigrants, there was not a hesitancy by Senator John Conness specifically.
Sure, I do not think, and you could prove me wrong. Look, I may have mistaken because it's a big debate, but I do not think that there was a large-scale discussion on, well, if it passes this certain threshold, then we would no longer be in favor of this.
Okay, give me just a moment to pull this up. And by the way, I think you're applying a very specific framework. I want to be clear. That's not the way you said it. That would require an entirely different kind of legislation, which concerns the amount of immigrants, because there are specific caps, right? The Congress passes different legislation, which concerns caps to immigration.
Yeah, that's why I think that the 14th Amendment did not discuss thresholds, and thresholds do not apply.
Well, hold on. Two things. They don't give a policy prescription because that's not the point of that debate. What they do, however, make very clear is there is a perception about how many immigrants are being received. And if you want any more evidence of that, I mean, I think you and I would both agree.
I'm looking for any evidence of that.
Well, hold on. If you wouldn't cut me off with snarky replies, I think I'll get to what you and I both agree on. The Congress obviously was very concerned about mass migration to the United States, which is an issue of quantity. If that was not the case, they wouldn't have had an explicit labor ban of Chinese migrants.
I don't think they had that at the time of the ratification.
They had it right, like, and what was hilarious too, you had in 1868 the ratification of the 14th Amendment. 10 years later, or 14 years later, you had the first restriction of Chinese immigrants. 10 years after that, they extended it. 10 years after that, they extended it again. No.
So 14 years after the debate that they had?
Well, yeah, pre Wong Kim Ark.
Yes. So at the time, I do not think it was a major concern of theirs.
Let me say this. So it became a major concern.
It wasn't a big enough concern that they would not ratify the amendment.
Well, yeah, because they were incorrect. Like, so hold on.
Okay, so they were incorrect. Their intent was no, this is important. Their intent, right, was incorrect in your mind, which is fine, but it means that their intent points to my argument that they did not have a threshold.
No,
you can say that was an incorrect intent to have, but it was absolutely true.
Kai, did you have a clarification there?
Yes. Wick, it would be over. Okay. If the argument is about whether or not the Congress in 1868 that debated and ratified the 14th Amendment was concerned about an excess of immigration, then it would be overwhelmingly clear that only less than 2 decades later, they pass severe restriction to immigration. They then extend that in 10 years later. They extend it one more time and ratify it into law in the Chinese Exclusion Act. Do you believe that the Congress in 1868 just wasn't concerned about it at all, and then something, perhaps mass migration, happened in the 14-year interim that made them very worried about it and caused them to restrict immigration? Like, wouldn't that make my point? That is my argument, is that they ratified something, not expecting it to have a certain result, and when they saw that result, they very significantly restricted immigration because they didn't like what was happening. Like, that's my argument.
Sure. So 2 points, right? So one, I do not believe that the legislation was even made up of many of the same people. Many of the legislators at the time were much different because we have elections every 2 to 6 years, depending on if it's the House or the Senate or whatever, right? So many of those positions changed hands. It wasn't even the same body of legislators at the time. So that's point one. Point two is that when they saw that there was a
could you repeat the first point? Sorry.
Yes, it wasn't the same body of legislators. There were different ones that were elected. I don't know the ratio, but I don't think all of them all won their seats continuously up until 14 years later. I would be shocked if that was the case. I don't know for sure. Maybe you can get an on me by saying, no, it was the exact same legislator. But I'm saying that there are different people. So that's one. But
can I clarify on that?
Oh, sure.
It is important. Do you then believe that the Congress that ratified the 14th Amendment was very liberal as it concerned birthright citizenship? Like, they would have been in favor of it even if it were millions of people?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. I'll take that. I'll let you keep going.
Yeah, I just don't.
That's fair. That's fair.
I do not know the liberal versus Republican not liberal versus Republican is different at that time, but liberal versus conservative makeup of the legislator at the time. I just don't know that. That is a question I cannot honestly answer.
No,
but
totally
the second
fine.
point is that when they saw that there was a problem with immigration that they needed to solve, they did not remove birthright citizenship. They used other measures to restrict immigration, which is my argument that while there might be problems with immigration, mass migration, all these things, that we can solve these without resorting to ending birthright citizenship. And the reason we shouldn't end birthright citizenship goes to the question I keep asking that you keep not answering. Should the children be punished for the sins of their fathers?
Okay, so yeah, I guess just in an effort to actually move on to that next point,
please.
I think a couple things have happened here. I really wish I could pull this up from the Congressional Globe. Now I've even lost the freaking website I had pulled up of the Congressional Globe. And if anybody has seen the website, you understand like how frustrating it is to read over.
It's trash to navigate. Yeah, it's trash to navigate.
It is absolute trash to navigate because it's the primary source document and you have to scan through it. Anyway, so I brought up a clear example, and if anybody can pull this up, they'll see that I'm correct. I'm saying and representing accurately what was being said. Even the liberal proponents of birthright citizenship did not have the perspective that it would apply to hundreds of thousands of people the way that it does today. I don't believe that their opinions on that matter significantly changed, despite the fact that maybe they realized just how significant the change would be and they attempted other means of restricting immigration. I think it's difficult because sometimes we have this perception that, well, Pandora's box has been opened, we can't go back. But I think the fact that there's never been a Supreme Court ruling on the issue of the children of illegal immigrants makes it easy, at least in that way, to change and not even amend, just for Congress to go in and specify what the qualifications for birthright citizenship are. You, however, in response to my argument, and I would say your framing, the framing that you wanted to see is, we're upset with immigration if there are this quantity. Well, that's not the way it's said. In fact, in a congressional debate like that, it would be kind of weird because this is a different policy issue of how many immigrants are coming in yearly. But their perceptions were very clear in statements like that of, and I believe he actually mentions a numerical value. The senator, I believe it's Conness from California. He mentions two things, and I want to repeat them because I think they both go very clearly to show that the quantity is important. First, that he believed that the Asians, and this was his argument against Senator Howard, who was an opponent, he said, well, look, don't worry about it because either dead or alive, their bones are returning to China. And so that's part of it. It's not a mass influx that stays here and has children and the children have children. It's a pretty steady stream, and there's a very consistent exchange of individuals like coming here and then leaving, which isn't the case in our current system. Second, as he referred to, he actually responds to Senator Howard, who had said, this will not, of course, apply to the children of, foreign diplomats. What are the other words that he uses? Aliens or...
I'm familiar with the quote, but I can't, I don't
You know the one I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about, yes. But it basically says everyone except for this group.
Yes.
And this group is foreign diplomats, the sons of, ambassadors,
yes,
stuff like that.
Precisely. And so in response as well, he says, I see no reason to oppose this legislation, which will apply to a couple scores. I think he says that. I think this I'll say, I'll go 50-50 because I don't have the congressional record in front of me. I believe he says a couple scores or a handful of scores. Now, your rejection of that was totally vibes-based. It was, well, he's speaking in general terms. Well, even if he's speaking in general terms, a score is a very low numerical value. You cannot extrapolate 100,000 people from scores of individuals. That would be like saying a policy that, applies to dozens of individuals. A dozen is not comparable to thousands. It's not comparable to 10,000. And I think Senator Conness, I believe, is who it was that used that specific language, I think makes very clear that his perception does not deal with the mass amount of immigration that we are feeling now. But I think that about sums up the first point. I think, would you agree that maybe the Congress at the time did not anticipate that so many people would take advantage of birthright citizenship?
Sure.
Terrific. Now that would,
but simply because they may not have anticipated,
Mhm.
I don't know if they did or not. It's possible,
yeah.
but it's also possible that they did not see it as something that was an insolvable problem, so they put it in place knowing that as things go and we have a whole system in place to make adjustments, make new laws, make new other adjustments, even to the Constitution, new amendments, that they could fix it as they went. You
Mm.
concede to that? Just so we
Terrific.
can,
That's actually what I'm trying to do right now. Is I'm trying to use that process that they established to use the Congress to
but
fix this
and
particular thing.
also to just to really hammer it home.
Mhm.
Again, the intent at the time, they understood that this would apply to everyone except for very specific groups, even to gypsies, to Chinese immigrants, to everyone, right? Italians, all these people.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah, it would apply to them all, but in, I would argue, a far lower quantity was their expectation. And so then my argument would be, we have a moral justification, at least to the extent that we seek to represent the will of the people, to look at a policy which has not had the intended effect and remedy that to the best extent possible. And then that leads to your second point. Should children suffer for the sins of their fathers? Well, there are many ways in which they do that. When a parent commits...
No, not suffer. Be punished.
Well, I think most punishment, causes some kind of suffering, but I'll be more specific in my language. Should children be punished for the sins of their fathers? Well, I think in many ways they are. I mean, a child incurs the punishment.
I didn't ask if they are or not, because we can all point to incidents where that might be the case. But my statement here isn't what is happening, but what should happen. And my should statement is no.
Well, I think in certain cases, yes.
Do you disagree?
Yeah,
with that?
I mean, as a religious principle, no. And that's easier to adjudicate because specifically like sin or virtue, this is something that is very easily attributable to just one.
As a legal thing, you should not punish legally a child because their parents committed a crime.
I think it depends entirely on the way that the consequences felt. For instance,
can you give me an example of where you think it would be legally justified or we should put into law where a child should be punished legally because their father or their mother committed a crime? Can you give me a good example of when you think that would be appropriate?
Yeah, and you may actually disagree with my framing here, but this is the way that I'm understanding it. If a parent, for instance, acquires a piece of property and they do so illegally, the child grows up in that house. This is, the thing that they depend on. They have no other protection. This is the place that they have grown up. It is their cherished home. The parent, however, having entered into, some contract illegally, or maybe even just breaking the stipulations of the contract, has the home stripped from them. And the child and the parent together are forced to be homeless. The child is being punished for something that the child had never done. But I don't think there's any other way of applying the penalty that actually establishes a kind of justice in our legal system, other than holding the parent responsible and realizing that, unfortunately, that also extends to the child.
So the problem with this framing, though, is that we are not stripping the home from the child. The child does not own that home. The child does not have that home. He may have stayed in that home. He may have lived in that home, but he is not losing something that he would otherwise gain. You would agree with me that the way that birthright citizenship has been applied in this nation for generations now has been that when you are born here on jus soli, as you said, right? If you're born on American soil, you are granted citizenship. And to strip away birthright citizenship means that you are stripping away something that these people have now. It's taking away something that exists. You wouldn't have a much stronger argument if we did not have generations of this being applied in this way. And to be clear, the Supreme Court has often made rulings on laws that are iffy because by removing that law, it would create such an administrative burden or create such a problem on things, on the way that things have been done for so long, that they simply allow that law to stand because they recognize that by stripping away common practices in many cases can have undue burdens upon people. So my argument today, or one of my arguments today, is that we should not punish the children of illegal immigrants by stripping away birthright citizenship from them. I don't think that's in our interest. And in fact, I'll make a positive claim here, or a positive argument for why we should grant them this. Well, let me ask you this. Is it, well, I don't even know your stance on this, actually. What is your stance on immigration in general? Are you just against all immigration? Should we just close our borders entirely, or are you in favor of some immigration? What's your stance here? I'm doing this in good faith. I'm trying.
Yeah, of
I
course.
don't know.
Absolutely. I'm in favor of a net zero policy. I think that if we can have deportations occurring of especially individuals who have crossed in the last 5 years illegally, if we have those deportations occurring, I think we can prioritize O1 visas and heavily vetted marriage visas in terms of bringing people into the country.
Net zero means we have like the amount of going out through deportations is equal to the amount coming in through visas and all these things. That's your current stance. Now, is this a stance just based on the current status of, like, you think there are too many right now and we need to reduce, or we need to kind of keep that number stable for a while? Or is this more of a principle thing that you think that immigration in and of itself should remain net zero, I guess is the term you use? Which is it?
Yeah, not to belabor everybody with the whole debate about immigration. When I do debate immigration, I typically put it into 3 points. I think that there are unfortunate economic effects. Whether there's a difficult moral question, which is that I think a lot of immigrants are being abused. I think that it challenges the idea of citizenship and the idea of Americanism by reducing it to simply economic factors. And I think there's an electoral question to be understood as well. Those would be my principal reasons for objecting to an increase in immigration right now.
Okay, but in the future, you might say if the circumstances were to change, you have no objection to us adjusting. So you have a net positive immigration.
Yeah. I mean, I can't predict the future. If there was some situation that warranted that, yeah.
My argument right now, is that America is an aging nation, that we are needing an influx of new bodies. The birth rate, as you know, is declining. And this isn't just an American problem, to be clear. This is global. No country that I can think of off the top of my head, or most countries are in the similar state. We are in a crisis right now. And I think that in order to help us be as great as a nation as we have always been, that we need this influx of new blood. And I would argue that by extending birthright citizenship, that is one of the best ways in order to increase our population, because it gives a buy-in to the people who are born here. It gives them a sense of loyalty to our cause, right? Does that make sense?
Loyalty in what sense, and to what cause?
Sure. To the American cause, to the American project, right? To the American culture.
How defined?
Okay. Well, I wrote this down because I knew this would come up. Okay. I would argue that American culture is civic in nature, right? It's built on pluralism.
Can I ask?
Okay? Not because we have
just to clarify. Do you believe that's always been the case, or that it's currently the case and should remain so?
I think that it has been the case for a very long time, certainly post-Civil War. You can argue pre-Civil War, but I would say the Civil War fundamentally changed the country and what it was, right, in a lot of ways, right? You would agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So post-Civil War, we have, in general, been a culture built on pluralism, and that has increased and changed over the years, but it has gone towards that rather than away from it. And again, it's based on the belief that we have a shared commitment to liberty, self-government, equal citizenship, equal opportunity, and the idea that anyone, no matter whether you're Chinese, Japanese, Russian, German, you can all become an American. That is our shared culture, a large part of it at least. Do you disagree?
Yes, I believe. Well, and there's a part of it which is just a historical disagreement, and then there's a part of it which is a disagreement in terms of a prescriptive claim or a normative claim about what we should be doing. The historical disagreement, which would be that I think the most consistent thing throughout all of U.S. history has been a pressure of nativism. It has been pressure to assimilate, and it seems that the standards, it seems rather that the likelihood of assimilation and the pressure to assimilate seems to be decreasing year by year. We have certain ways of marking that very specifically. For instance, language retention is higher now than it was 10 years ago into the second and third generations. I think that's a very significant one because communication should be the kind of fundamental basis of cooperating as a nation. If you're unable to communicate with each other, you cannot engage even in just a purely civic project. So that's a very big concern for me. But then there's aspects, I mean, I agree with you that when you give people citizenship by the moment they're born here, whatever country they come from, you certainly encourage them to engage in, maybe the United States as a nation, as a civic project. The problem is that you begin to completely redefine what the civic project is. Because
how so?
As the pressure to assimilate declines, individuals will stop carrying with them, or rather will stop feeling the pressure to live up to the original intent of the nation, which, as we both agree, shifted very significantly as we've had more people immigrate to the United States. But they also tend to craft it after their home nations.
Hold on there. It's shifted significantly based on a whole host of factors, on how we deal with our foreign adversaries and our foreign allies, as
100%.
well as
100%.
world and global events, World War II,
100%.
World War I. You had the Cold War. We've also had a massive change in technology that has absolutely impacted our culture in ways that we're still feeling and we're still reeling from. And I would actually argue, and this might be a little tangential, so I won't stick on it too much, but the technological advances in the last 20 years have changed our culture more than immigration ever fucking could. Like, either way, right? Like, positive, negative, it doesn't matter. The invention of this and social media has impacted not only American culture, but global culture in general. And I would also argue that one of the biggest changes we've had to American culture is the globalization of American culture. American culture is our biggest import, right? Or export, I should say. It's our biggest export into the world. Everyone knows American songs, American movies, right? You look at even in Iceland and Greenland and China and Japan, they're all wanting to watch American movies, come to America right? Like, everyone wants to come to America. We are how did Reagan put it? The shining city, on a hill.
Yeah, I think Jesus put it that way first, but Reagan also said that.
Yeah, my favorite speech of any American president was that speech by Reagan. He knocked it out of the park. I don't like him for other reasons, right? But that, I gotta give the man credit. Okay.
Can I say, Wick? I think it's interesting because there's an interesting debate within the conservative movement about Reagan. How now we're kind of falling out of love with him a little bit because of some of the things that
of Trump
he did. Not necessarily.
Populism and Trump. Yeah.
I don't think that's what it is. I think people now are kind of looking.
Well, that's a side debate, and we can have that another.
And we're already branching into the side debate of just immigration as a whole. But I'll say, hold on. Even if you look at Reagan, for instance, this is a guy who passed amnesty with the goal of decreasing immigration in the future, especially illegal immigration. And what happened? The complete opposite. So
that wasn't his goal. Is to decrease immigration. His goal was to decrease illegal immigration because he wanted the amnesty paired with certain policy changes that I would agree did not pass. Right, later they did not come to pass.
Well, they did come to pass. They just didn't have the effect that was desired.
Well, if your argument today is that there is too much illegal immigration, we need to do something about it. Fair enough. Birthright citizenship is perhaps the worst solution, and I would argue it's a cure that is worse than the disease. I think that ending of birthright citizenship, like, I don't know if you understand, but birthright citizenship is like a load-bearing rule for a lot of our institutions, for how we integrate children into our society. All these things, like, to change birthright citizenship would require a change to how hospitals are run, how Social Security is run, how employment verification is run. All these things would have to change. It would be a mess. And do you trust our government to implement new policies, regulations, and procedures that in a smooth manner that would affect all these things? No, look, it would just be.
Yeah, I think I trust them just about as much as I trust the Congress back in 1868, who ratified it without ever understanding just the amount of negative consequence that it would have. I completely agree with. Hold on, I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you that
much more than I trust the Congress of today.
I completely agree with you that a Congress could vote on something and it could have the exact opposite or a completely undiscovered actual result. I completely agree with you there. You'll find no argument. I think that's kind of the way
funny.
that policy
I'll say
works.
a thing and then you'll agree with something I didn't say, maybe a slight variation. It's just funny. It's interesting.
Well, that's intentional. It kind of gives the debate some liveliness because it's like it is funny to say.
No, I think we're having a lively, fun debate.
Of course, it's fun to say. Oh, I completely agree with you, and then act as if you had said something totally different. I mean, it's just
exactly. It's fun. we're having fun.
But I do want to say, your kind of original contention, kind of away now from the issue of immigration in general, and I would argue just to touch on this because you brought it up, and I don't want it to go unaddressed. Certainly, technology has changed, societies and cultures in very significant ways. I don't think it's made China less Chinese, and I think that it hasn't made necessarily America less American in a way that immigration certainly could make China less Chinese, and that immigration has made America less American. I absolutely believe that.
Well, as someone who studied Mandarin, right, and I was in the military for a few years, and I was a cryptolinguist. My target language was Mandarin Chinese. Don't ask me to speak too much of it because it's been like 12 years, man. I've lost a lot of it. But the culture of China has changed significantly since the CCP was first founded in the 70s.
So is Russia.
And as we opened up China in the 90s, right, we brought them into the kind of global society that has had wide impacts on Chinese culture, right? The Chinese, what it means to be Chinese today is different than what it meant to be Chinese 20 years ago.
So if we look at the origin of the United States, I really don't want to get bogged down too long for this. If you look at the origin of the United States, Samuel P. Huntington breaks this really down in his book, Who Are We? And he's actually somebody who's not against immigration. He's just in favor of assimilation.
I'm not unfamiliar with this man.
No worries. He's great. I actually encourage you to read his book. I'm reading through it right now. He breaks down really well kind of the idea of national identity, even though I disagree with his ultimate prescription, which is for more immigration. I look, and I think everybody looks at the origin of the United States going from 1605 to the 1787 Constitution and the next maybe 50 years. America was originally founded with unity on 4 distinct parts. The national identity of the United States originally was comprised of an ethnic unity, a racial unity, a religious unity, and a political or cultural unity. Now, over time, those different markers have gone decreasing. Post-Civil War, the racial component, of course, changed. The ethnic component changed as you began to have more Eastern Europeans immigrate to the United States. I feel like now the only unity that we have is the kind of unity that you described, which is purely by products. I don't want a nation that is that has a national identity that is simply placed on the physical products. Culture is a lot deeper than that. National identity is a lot deeper than that. It's perceptions. It is not just products, but perceptions and practices. And those perceptions and practices, and also the products, have changed very significantly as a result of immigration and could not be affected by any other thing. The amount of Spanish speakers in the United States of America has changed significantly, not because of any other reason but immigration to the United States. It's not just because people have phones that have Duolingo. The fact that there are Somali communities, not Somali, my apology, they are sometimes Somali, but also Egyptian, also Jordanian.
Somalis don't speak Spanish.
No, this is a separate point if you'd let me finish. The fact that there are these communities in Minnesota that practice female genital mutilation, and the fact that that is now occurring in the United States, is a shift in the national culture in a way that could not have occurred bar more immigration. Those kind of changes are not occurring in China. They're not occurring in China because China has been particularly strict, at least in that effort. So their national identity on the prior 3 points that we mentioned, the ethnicity, the race, and religion, these are 3 that have remained relatively the same, except I would say probably religion has taken the most significant hit. That is just kind of an aside, and I would argue you've kind of set up a system that is now very dangerous because hold on. First of all, would you agree or disagree that the pressure to assimilate is in decline in the United States?
It would depend on in what way. I think that assimilation might look different today than it did 20 to 30 to 40 to 50 years. But I think that there is a current national argument that we are having on whether or not we even want immigrants in the nation whatsoever. And immigrants are seeing this, and you would agree just on the face, if a country doesn't want you there, you're less likely to assimilate into the country itself, correct? Right? If you feel otherized
No,
to
I
a
disagree.
greater extent than you did before, no,
I,
you
I, I think
absolutely would.
I,
If you
I
feel otherized to a greater extent than
Mhm.
you had before, you are less likely to want to be joining with that group. That's just human nature. That's just how that works,
I think you're
right? So,
well. That was a
if I can
question.
finish,
Can I respond to the question?
well, it's not a question. I'm
Oh,
making an argument, and I'm going to
it
continue
was a
with my
rhetorical
argument,
question. My
right?
apologies.
It was, right. Um, I think that when it comes to what we should be doing when it comes to assimilation is encouraging more of it. So you might be right that it is decreasing in certain ways. But my argument would be that by ending birthright citizenship, you would decrease it even more. It would be adding an extra barrier to assimilation that wasn't there before. If we want to increase assimilation, which I think we both do, maybe I'm wrong, then there are ways to do that by being more welcoming, by stop otherizing them, by stop sending ICE agents to terrorize their communities, right? I don't think that's the way. And I take great exception to your painting of our culture having changed because we have certain groups who practice what I consider abhorrent cultural practices. Female genital mutilization has not been
Mutilation.
normalized in any way, shape, or form in the United States. It just
I
hasn't,
hope not. Yeah.
right? That hasn't entered into our culture. That is an anomaly that a very, very small percentage of people are practicing. I find it abhorrent. I think it should be illegal. I would be surprised if it wasn't. But
It is actually. There haven't been any prosecutions, but it is illegal.
yeah.
So yeah. Well, how do you think assimilation worked before 1868?
So assimilation worked before 1868 by jus soli. Because again, remember, our founders used British common law as the basis of the judicial system that we built. So we didn't just have birthright citizenship in 1868. We had it up until Dred Scott. And Dred Scott changed that. We had a whole fucking civil war. And then we
Let's
wanted
not say
to
the F word.
reaffirm what are we going to do with these slaves, the children of slaves. And there's other reasons that we wanted to kind of reaffirm this and put it into the Constitution because it was never in the Constitution before, right? We didn't have any kind of citizenship test in the Constitution, but we do have court cases, right? Going back to 1838, for example, that clearly state that they were using jus soli as a standard. Illegal immigrants from, I believe it was Italian, I believe, I could be wrong. But they stated because the child is born here and because it is under the protection, under our sovereign protection, because who's going to protect that child when robbers come in to steal or murderers come in to try to murder them? It will be our police force.
So
Right?
so
It
so
will
if
be
I
our military that protects them.
so if
Therefore,
I
they
move
owe us. Hold on, let me finish. Therefore, they owe us allegiance. They owe us their sovereigns an allegiance because it is our laws that protect them. It is our forces that protect them. That was the argument back in 1838, right? That was the standard back in way before the Civil War, right? Way before Dred Scott. So the birthright citizenship 14th Amendment that was ratified in 1868 was really a reaffirmation of that rather than something wholly new.
So if I move to a foreign country as I'm a child, do I owe an allegiance to that country because I'm also protected by it?
To some extent, but not as much as if you were born there.
So if I was born in a country
because
I moved the next day to a foreign country, what would make me more allegiant to the first than the second?
So if you're talking about birth tourism, I would agree with you that you would have more allegiance to the country that you are raised in, right? That's just true. I can't deny that. However,
I'm glad you
if
can
we
see
want
that.
to,
Some people push that, and it's
yeah.
like I think that's
Well,
intuitively
no,
true.
I mean it's just true. And
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest throughout this whole thing, right? But that's problem. First of all, I don't know if it exactly is a problem because they still have when they grow up the burden to pay taxes, and that helps us, right? And I think it incentivizes them to come back and participate in our society and participate in our culture. And I like that. I think that we are made stronger by more people from different walks of life. That does not mean that all cultures are the same or all cultures are good. I want their culture to fundamentally shift to ours. And
Based.
while yes, birthright citizenship or birthright tourism, birthright tourism,
Birth tourism.
birth tourism is a problem. The solution to that is not to end birthright citizenship, because that would create a whole host of other problems. We can tackle visa applications. If you are pregnant, you do not get a visa to come into this country, right?
Based.
It won't solve the problem completely, but I think it will reduce the amounts that happen. And to be clear, the amounts that happen and the best numbers I can find, and I think these for 2023, is like 36,000 births from birth tourism in 2023. That's like less than 1% of everything. It's just such a small problem.
I'll say it's very likely an undercount, but even still, it's like for me there, it's a principal issue more than it is a quantity issue. If the quantity were higher, don't get me wrong, I think it'd be a lot worse. But yeah, it's kind of the principle. What I think is that jus sanguinis makes far more sense as a policy. I reject the idea that it would be so catastrophically difficult to change this, because most other Western countries, which have, by the way, a far more difficult system, or rather a far more bureaucratic system of social welfare. We're talking about Germany, we're talking about Ireland.
How are they doing with assimilation over there right now?
I mean, if you look at a country like England, very poorly.
Or Germany, pretty much most of Europe.
Yeah, I think they're doing very poorly. But I think that's because they've allowed
this rule of jus sanguinis, and I think that speaks to my point.
Wait, what?
Because they do not. Yes, because they do not have birthright citizenship.
Wait, okay.
One
of
the reasons that they are having
This is
trouble
super important.
assimilating
This is super important.
because of this.
This is super important. Do you think if we gave citizenship to every single immigrant to the United States, do you think it would improve assimilation?
Yes.
Okay, that's.
Hold on. Why would it
hold
not?
on. Would you prescribe that? Like, do you think that that's
no, because it would create a whole host of other problems. That's not my prescription. But the simple question: would it increase the rate of assimilation? Yeah, but we have other factors to include.
Do you think that
birthright citizenship, if I may finish, if it comes to birthright citizenship, right? We're talking about children. We're talking about babies who are born, and I think that does not have the same problems of giving an adult, a 30-year-old male who was raised in Russia or raised in India or raised in Somalia or raised in China or raised wherever, right? That isn't here. That has a different effect than giving it to a child who often is raised here, who is inundated into our culture, into our system, who is in every sense, legal and otherwise, American.
Okay.
Do you disagree with that?
I think there's a significant issue that creates. And this is what I've actually been meaning to get to. First, I would say just rejecting the idea that the problem in Europe is the fact that they're not naturalizing people. I think the problem is that they've allowed for, Germany.
That's not what I said, man. The problem,
Hold on.
They have a lot of problems, but one of the problems and one of the reasons that they're having problems with assimilation is because they're creating a country within a country, right? Especially in Germany, right? Where they have, they recently changed it a little bit to address this problem, but it's a little cattywampus, okay? So they're having these like stateless citizens, and stateless citizens are very dangerous because they are very susceptible to radicalization by extremist groups. ISIS does a lot of its recruitment among stateless citizens. You have other terrorist groups and other extremist groups that do its recruitment among stateless citizens because these people don't have a home in a very real sense. And these extremist groups offer them offer them a place to kind of plant their flag. This is just borne out by the data over the years. We can watch this, we can see this. And so I would posit that by creating that same problem that is existing in Germany, that's existing in other countries in the European Union and things like that, you're opening up America to having those same problems here. And I don't want that to be happening.
But they're not stateless citizens. In the United States, like if a child of Mexican illegal immigrants came to the United States and was born here and did not have the immediate right of birthright citizenship, they would still be a Mexican citizen.
I don't think that applies to all countries. That might apply to Mexico.
Could you cite me an example that wouldn't apply?
It would, for example, a refugee, right? A refugee that has been expelled from a nation at war where they are in bitter civil war and they are expelling out whole hosts of ethnic minorities, of other groups, and stripping them of citizenship. These children have no state because their parents have been stripped of statehood. And this is a problem. Well, a lot of the refugees coming from Syria and come from these other countries, that is an issue that they're currently resolving, right? And they're in a kind of limbo state that we don't really know yet. And therefore they are stateless. It's a real problem, man. It's going on right now.
I understand that, and it's certainly like it is a real problem and it exists outside of it. But I think that the influence that has in a national politic is not the way that you make it out to be. It's rather that the United States would not recognize that individual has rights to the same social or welfare benefits that an American citizen would. And by the way, it does not matter if they're stateless or if they have a state. The political prescription of the United States would be the same towards that individual, which is that they do not have access to the benefits that are given to a citizen of the United States. It's not as if
But
it's not as if
how being stateless exacerbates that situation.
Explain to me how you believe that exacerbates it.
Sure. So if I were to strip the citizenship of someone who is a dual citizen of America and Mexico, they can go back to Mexico and they can get all the benefits from being a Mexican citizen there, right? They have all access to every benefit a Mexican citizen may have. I don't know off the top of my head what those benefits are, but I would imagine they would be subject to any welfare systems that they may have back there, et cetera, right?
Right to vote.
Just acknowledge that. Mm-hmm. When you have a stateless citizen whose country's embroiled in civil war, who their country's government is not recognizing them as citizens, they do not have the same place that they can go back to and fall back on. And so it affects them differently. So like,
wait, like how?
Well, I'm explaining, right? So like, if you cannot access services in America, welfare services, but you need those services, you can't just go back to your home and get them there. You have to choose something else.
Well,
and a lot of the things that they turn to are crime, terrorism, and extremism because they really have no other choice.
Okay, so basically the United States is in a bind where if it has an immigrant that comes to the United States who's not a citizen, and then their country of origin decides to say, hey, this guy is saying or doing something in the United States that we want him stripped of his citizenship for, that person is then just put in this bind where it's like, all right, well, either the United States has to recognize me as a citizen or I'm going to become a terrorist. I think that's ridiculous.
There are for adults, there are other ways that we can solve this problem, but I'm talking for children.
Well, a child is not going to become a terrorist because they don't have healthcare in Mexico or the United States.
Please. Children who are growing up knowing that there's nowhere that they belong. It obviously makes them more susceptible to propaganda and other things. This is just true.
Okay, so I just kind of disagree with a large part of the framing here. Again, it's, first of all, when you mention this idea of being then restricted from having the benefits in your home country, like a child who moves here,
or being a home country where you can't go to because
hold on.
Let Kai finish at least.
Killed, right?
Kai finish.
So let's say you're a child that's brought over with your parents to the United States. You don't have birthright citizenship. You can still have your citizenship of your home country revoked for whatever reason. Does the United States have an obligation to make that child a U.S. citizen? Of course not. Well, this is the problem, is you've created this arbitrarity where somehow, the United States, although the same risk exists, the child that's still a stateless child. The child who immigrates to the United States.
We talked about amount earlier and how amount matters.
No, I'm not changing the amount. I'm not changing the amount. It could be a single person. All I'm saying is that your logic applies not just to children born in the United States who wouldn't have citizenship in the United States. It also applies to the children of immigrants who are brought here as children.
Yes, but by revoking birthright citizenship, you increase that number and you make it harder to deal with the problem because you would you've acknowledged it all the whole time that it's easier to deal with 20 than it is to deal with 2 million, right?
Certainly.
So the more we increase this, the harder it is to deal with this. And so again, by removing birthright citizenship, we're not talking 10% of the kids who come here. We're talking 100%.
Okay,
right? Which is obviously an issue. Maybe I miscommunicated. Maybe I spoke wrong. What's very
I misinterpreted what you were saying about the aspect of quantity.
So you understand that it would just Like,
here's
we can't.
the
I'm
issue.
not-
Here's the issue, Wick. The reason the quantity
give me the
argument,
issue, give me
the reason the quantity argument doesn't work is because the amount of stateless people who would be coming here is so few in number. It's not just children of immigrants, because the children of immigrants born here in the United States still become citizens of their home countries. It's not as if every Mexican child born in or every child of Mexicans who is then born in the United States is a stateless citizen or is likely to become so. And it's not as if the United States is receiving millions of Syrians, at least not until this point. Germany is a different case, but the United States has never received millions of people or even hundreds of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, I don't know how it was during the Obama era, of people from foreign nations, right? So your argument about quantity, your argument of quantity does not actually, your argument of quantity doesn't actually matter, because we're talking about people who would become stateless. And the vast majority of children who would be born here and not get American citizenship would not become stateless. They would have citizenship in their home countries because both of their parents have been for several years, or at least a decade, residents of a different state. That is the policy of jus sanguinis. That's the same thing we do with Americans. If I have a child abroad, that child is an American because I have lived for decades of my life in the United States of America. I think that is a far more reasonable policy. What about that is an unreasonable policy? What about that is worse than jus soli?
Well, good thing we don't have to choose, because we have both. And my argument tonight is that we should have both. Yes, jus sanguinis allows me, if I were to go to Russia or to China or to Japan and I have a child, that they would get the benefits of being an American citizen simply because they are of my blood. I don't think that's a problem. I would not want to change that. I think that's a great thing. Did you freeze or?
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
He's still here.
You just went like this for a while.
I went.
That might have been on mine. That might have been on my end. I was like, whoa. But I think that jus soli is also a good thing. And I understand that not every single child would be born stateless here, but it would increase the amount by a number that is much more than I'm willing to deal with. And I'm not saying all of them, but it's more than I think that we should. It would make our country less safe.
Okay.
Just definitionally. And if I may finish, right? I think that, again, we want more people to come in and be participators in the American project. We want more families. We want more business leaders. We want more taxpayers. We want more inventors. We want all these people. Now, if you want to restrict immigration to a select few that and brain drain these other countries, we can do that, right? We can do H-1 visas and things like that, all these things. These are great policies for a lot of reasons, but they are beyond the scope of what we're going to argue today, because I see you shaking your head. But I think that their children deserve to be born American, and I think that it helps America that they are. I like the policy that we have right now. I don't like the implementation of all the immigration and visa problem. Like, if we want to solve immigration, we got to tackle the asylum problem.
True.
That's where we need to focus.
True. And we need more judges. I think the judges are a big part of it. There's a huge holdup.
Well, there's a lot of issues that we need to fix. But I think the asylum issue, because we've signed some treaties which kind of put us in a bind there, right? I think America should keep its word. I think America should honor the treaties that it has signed. And we also have, as you said, a lack of judges, a lack of immigration court procedures. And I don't know if you'll agree with this, but I think Trump has really screwed the pooch in how he's handled immigration since he's been implemented in his second term.
I agree.
It's been a horrible mess.
I think it's taken an issue where the majority of Americans agree with it, and I think it is kind of optically ruined it in a way where I think it's going to be very difficult for people to advocate for immigration restriction in the future. I hope I'm wrong about that, but I think we'd actually agree there that there are ways that the Trump admin has handled the optics of immigration and deportation specifically, and it was just so callous, so cruel that it really
I wouldn't call that optics, but fear.
Right.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
right? I see what you're saying.
Anyway, though, kind of 2 points here. One
Please.
of them, and this harkens back maybe to the way that we were starting, or not the way we started, a kind of point we haven't addressed, which is kind of the constitutional aspect. I do believe, and this is my ought claim, right? I believe as a normative claim, birthright citizenship, or citizenship rather, ought to be extended to people who have full allegiance to the country. Now, this is difficult in the case of jus soli citizenship because it seems there is a competing allegiance. I believe And it's been interesting because in your opening statement, you seem to disagree with this. You didn't say that explicitly, but you did disagree with the principle. I believe an individual, as a child, follows pretty closely in line with the allegiance of his parents. At least that's reasonable to expect. And I think in practice, it kind of ought to be that way. I think it presents a very cruel issue when you begin to divorce a child from his responsibility and allegiance to his parents and their allegiance, and you basically set up a child. You set up a child in a situation where they have the capacity to, like, by aiding their parents, become a treasonous actor in the United States. I think it's far easier to recognize that a child would likely fall in line with the allegiance of his parents. And that's, by the way, literally the case, because when we look at the way that citizenship is extended, from the moment of birth, the first citizenship that an individual gains is the citizenship of their parents. It is not American citizenship. There are two competing citizenships here. And that, I think, is a very difficult issue because it presents a challenge to a complete allegiance. Now, if the parents, and this, by the way, in the original conversation, and I have it pulled up now if we need to go back and pull quotes, and for the benefit of everybody listening, I will cite specifically the things that I mentioned earlier in the debate as we close. We have the congressional record. It seems very clear that allegiance is a specific issue. Now, what you've done interestingly, and you did this in your opening, is you created a situation saying that a child should have birthright citizenship because it gives them a sense of duty and responsibility to the American nation. Well, what if that sense of duty and responsibility to the American nation conflicts with what's happening in their family? Their parents are not American citizens. I think this puts us in an interesting bind, for instance.
We already have a solution for that. We already have a solution for that based into how we do this. We do not have we can revoke our own citizenship. There's a term for it, and it's
expatriation.
I wish it wasn't, right? But we have a
Is it expatriation?
Yes, we can expatriate by choice, right? We can decide we are going to reject our citizenship of our country and pledge allegiance to another country. And there's nothing legally that we have in our Constitution or in our laws to stop that. So if a child's allegiance is coming into conflict with their family's allegiance, when they come of age, they can simply revoke their citizenship.
Well, but you wouldn't be in favor of that. You wouldn't be in favor of that, though.
Because I want more Americans. I think people should be loyal to America more than their other countries that they're a part of.
See this?
I would like a dual citizen of America and Canada to pledge full allegiance to America, not have a dual citizenship. That would be my druthers if I had my druthers.
Well,
but our system, if our system allows for dual citizenship, I think that's fine overall. But if I were to, I'm an American first kind of guy, right?
So
I'm a patriot in a lot of ways. I think America is the best country in the world. Our culture is the best in the world, despite problems, right? That I will admit that we have and have had in the past. I think that I want, when my country's interest come into conflict with any other country's interest, I want my country's interest to be put first. So if my country's interest comes into conflict with Russia's interest, I want my country's interest to come first. If my country's interest comes into conflict with Israel's interest, I want my country's interest to be put first. If my country's interest comes into conflict with Germans or the European Union's or Mexicans' interest, I want my country's interest to be put forth. And I think that that is done by, at the very start, by extending citizenship to any and all who are born within our borders, except for very edge cases, right? Like sons of diplomats and things like that.
I think this is where it gets to based liberal fascism of you know what, child, your parents may not be a part of the nation.
I don't know about fascism. That's a weird word.
But you don't have responsibility to your family. Your first responsibility is to the American nation. If a child is born to a legal,
I would extend the citizenship to their parents too, if they were able to pass certain checks and tests and things.
That's a complete 180 from what you said at the beginning of the debate, which is about because you hold on. You cited very specifically at the beginning of the debate that it wouldn't be a problem because it does not provide an easier path to citizenship to the parents. You literally said, well, they have to wait till the child's 18. It won't be a problem. And now
I was addressing the concern of anchor babies. To be clear,
so
a lot of people say.
But then
I said that concern could be addressed other ways, and it doesn't exacerbate that concern.
But Wick, your own stated policy objective that you just cited is actually going to perpetuate and make worse the issue of anchor babies.
Okay. Have you read that book by Matthew Iglesias?
Which book? I didn't hear you.
Have you read the book by Matthew Iglesias, 1 Billion Americans?
No.
You should.
That sounds terrible.
I don't.
A billion Americans?
All of it.
Oh no.
I like it because I think our culture is the best.
Well, can you answer the question though? Like,
have our culture.
I do want an answer to that question.
What's the question?
Like, how does your response to the concern of anchor babies, how have you not just defeated your prior, rebuttal or your prior assuasion of worries? I think that's a word. Your assuading of worries. How have you not just contradicted that by saying, well, I actually am in favor of extending citizenship to the parents of children who just become citizens by virtue of being born here? How does that not perpetuate the issue of anchor babies?
Because I don't expect all my policy prescriptions to be put into place. And this is one of those things where I'm willing to compromise on. Politics is the art of the possible. And I understand that I'm not going to get everything I want here. And that's fine. And I'm willing to kind of cede that. And I understand that not all immigrants should be citizens. I will say that up front, right? There's a lot of reasons why we wouldn't want an illegal immigrant here to become a citizen. If they're a criminal, right? If they've been violent, if they're part of a terrorist organization, these are all things that I would think would be disqualifying. So,
well, they don't have to be illegal immigrants. They could be legal or illegal.
Please, let me finish. Even if they have a quote unquote anchor baby, I think that we should have those policies in place that would restrict them simply becoming citizens because of the status of their baby, right? I think those are good prescriptions to keep in place. I'm not advocating for removing them. But if you're asking me for my ideal world, then my ideal world is everyone who qualifies gets to be a citizen.
What I think is super interesting is that earlier, I forgot to mention this, but I do want to mention it now. When we were discussing the issue of stateless individuals, you said that the quantity, although not crazy, would be significant enough for you to be concerned. But then as you cited anchor babies, you said, well, it's only 30,000 people. Although that might not be a ridiculous amount, that's enough for me to be concerned. And now you basically have made the argument.
Anchor babies, birth tourism.
Oh, birth
anchor
tourism.
Babies, I don't know the number for.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the point of an anchor baby, right? Is that you have a baby here that becomes a citizen, and that's, the point. I mean, maybe birth tourists, I guess there is the idea that they typically travel back with the family.
Birth tourism? No, what the point is of birth tourism is you come into the country, you have your kid here, then you take them to your home country and you raise them there.
Yes, yeah.
That way, when they grow up, they'll have that. So these are
good clarification.
Separate concerns.
Good clarification.
That aren't like we have separate solutions.
Would you say you're concerned about the number of anchor babies that we have here?
No, it's just so small.
Like,
small.
How are you concerned? How are you concerned about stateless citizens who probably number less than 30,000, but you're not concerned about birth tourism and anchor babies?
Did you say anchor babies or birth tourism?
Anchor babies.
Anchor babies? No, because I think that they aren't significantly impacting our culture, nor are they significantly impacting our ability to deal with illegal immigrant parents that are criminals or violent.
Okay, but Wick, if your policy, which you support, went through, which would make the parents of anchor babies American citizens, that would be the case. It would threaten the American culture,
and then oppose that policy if you want, but that does not address the issue of the debate, which is birthright citizenship.
You're right, but you're making these two-faced arguments. You're saying, well,
they're not two-faced.
No, they are. Let me explain why they are. Let me explain why they are.
Kai.
Let me explain why they are. You just said, well, I'm not worried about anchor babies because, look, it's not threatening American culture. You made that argument as if the threat to American culture is something you would be upset about if it occurred. But then you also said, well, I would be in favor of granting the parents of the anchor babies American citizenship, which obviously would threaten the American culture. And I know you said not all of them, but your amendment is, well, I'm not in favor of giving it to criminals. Well, of course, nobody's advocating for citizenship to be given to
terrorist organizations.
Okay, that includes 10 other people. Nobody is in favor of giving citizenship to criminals, terrorists, or members of drug cartels. Okay, that amendment is like a non-starter. Nobody disagrees with that idea. Nobody's advocating for citizenship for those kinds of people. But simultaneously, you're making the argument that anchor babies are fine because they don't threaten the national identity. But then you're saying, okay, but also if I had my way, I would do something that does threaten the national identity, which is give citizenship to all of the parents of those children, so long as they're not terrorists, drug dealers, or criminals.
Yeah, I would disagree that extending citizenship to immigrants who came here illegally that are willing to pledge allegiance to our country and our Constitution. I don't think that would significantly impact our cultural identity, or at least not in a negative way. I think it would be a positive overall.
Okay.
You disagree, and that's fine. Well, that's why we're debating, right?
That's so true. Let's get back
yeah.
to your contention then. Let's get back to the contention of whether it's just or not to punish a child for for the issues of the parents. I think it is far less just to set up a system where we are now forced. First, if parents immigrate illegally, the legal consequence for illegal entry into the United States of America is a fine. It is it can be a prison sentence. I mean, the second time you do it, it's a felony. But the first time, it's a misdemeanor. You have a fine to pay. You can serve prison time, but it's very unlikely. But the other consequence is that you are placed in removal proceedings. Obviously, you then go to a judge, and it's adjudicated, but you are placed in removal proceedings. That being the case, the issue of having birthright citizenship presents us with a conflict where the child is an American citizen, and you now are forced either to undermine legal penalties and say, okay, well, the family can stay here because the child is here, and you can't leave the child here, or, like, that's one option, or you have to get rid of them all. Like, that sucks. It sucks deporting an American citizen. We don't want to deport American citizens, but you've created that situation by extending birthright citizenship to the child of two illegal immigrants, although the child has another nationality, although he has an allegiance to another nation which descends from his parents. And I have not seen any reason to reasonably assume that the child should be less allegiant to the other nation, especially because when I asked you prior, you admitted that where the child is going to grow up, if it was a foreign country, they should be reasonably allegiant to that country.
Yes, I think that you're baking into the assumption that the correct procedure is to deport these people. I don't know if that's true, especially if they're contributing to the American project through
what if they aren't?
Their labor, through their I don't know, working in various industries that we have shortages in. I don't know if deportation is the correct penalty a lot of the time for these people.
What should be the penalty for illegal entry?
Hold on, let me answer the question.
Okay.
I think this is context dependent, but I think that, like, even if I would grant you that this is a problem, I think the problem of removing birthright citizenship creates a whole host of other issues. And let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
Say you have a hospital.
Yep.
A woman is in labor and rushes in. She doesn't have her immigration paperwork or her citizenship paperwork. She has no papers on her, right? She just comes on in, can't find the father. It's unknown, perhaps, right? And she gives birth. Without birthright citizenship, we now have a situation where we have to adjudicate whether or not that child is a citizen. Like, what sort of proof would be required to for the mother to have or to present in that case? A birth certificate alone would no longer be sufficient. We would have to set up a whole other system. And you can see how this could create even, and you've admitted before that we don't have enough immigration judges. So the caseload for these judges and for these cases would expand astronomically. So again, there might be problems with the current system. I am not saying that they're not. My argument is that the problems of the system that you are advocating for increase astronomically, exponentially. And that is just one of the issues that you have to address if you're going to change this policy.
Perfect. And because we're dealing in terms of our ideal worlds, and we're now getting into kind of normative policy, my kind of ideal policy prescription doesn't have that problem at all, because there's a severe restriction in the amount of people who even enter the United States. We're not going to have a problem of needing to adjudicate how many people are birthright citizens, because first, we would apply it through jus soli. Second, there'd be far fewer people entering the country. Third, people who have entered illegally would be deported with their... Oh, just sanguini, my apology.
Okay, because just solely, like, I agree with you. Okay, let's go.
No, just sanguini. I appreciate your correction there. So in my ideal world, that's not a problem at all, because there's less of an influx of individuals into the country.
But you can't just hand wave this away, because even in your ideal world where we have very, very few net zero immigration, we still have immigration, right? We still have visa holders and things like that. And so we would need a way to prove that someone who comes into a hospital is a citizen.
And
if they don't have paperwork, that's a problem.
That's a perfect case. We know exactly who they are, because if they're here on a visa, they've come from a different country, and we know exactly what that country is. And the child...
But we don't know if they're on a visa. They don't have their paperwork.
But you just cite... Okay, maybe you don't have it in the moment. You can find it. You know who the individual is.
Can you?
Yes, absolutely. If you have an individual's name, you can find a record of them in the United States. Unless they've come illegally, and then it's a bigger issue.
What if they never come back to the hospital?
What do you mean?
Right? Because we have to adjudicate either right now, it's not a problem because
Yes.
we get to adjudicate right now. If they're born here, they are an American citizen. But if we now have to prove their identity, now it creates this state of limbo where we have to be able to adjudicate the citizenship of the mother or the father, right? I would assume that if
how did the mother and father get into the United States?
Was not, that it would be a citizen, correct? In your ideal world?
Wait, say that one more time. If the father's a citizen but the mother's not?
Father, it doesn't matter which one, I guess. But one of the parents is a citizen.
Yeah, then the child's a citizen.
Not
a child's a
child
citizen.
is a citizen.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
That's the principle of jus sanguinis in practice.
Yes. But you'd have to figure out if at least one of them was a citizen. And there are tons of edge cases here, which you would not have access to paperwork because they go into labor suddenly, right? And they don't carry their paperwork on them. They don't carry.
And the mother runs away.
And you'd have to be able to adjudicate that. And who knows if they come back to the hospital? There's a million ways this can be abused, and a million ways which would just increase the court. It would be a nightmare, man.
Wick, how do you think pregnancy works?
Well, when a woman and a man love each other very
much. How do you think postpartum pregnancy works?
Postpartum pregnancy?
Do you think a mother gives birth and walks out of the hospital?
No, they could be out of the hospital that day, can't they?
They're usually out after a day or two. And if there's complications in the pregnancy, or if the child needs anything,
if there's complications,
if you need a blood transfusion, you're going to know the blood type of the mother. You're going to know very important details about her. And they're going to be, adequate enough to figure out who she is. And in my system, hold on.
I don't think we have a database of the DNA.
Hold on. I'm saying the blood type to point out that you're going to have, obviously, information that you wouldn't even need to find her, who she is. I'm saying that you're
determined citizenship. I'm just really curious.
Go. Hold on. Let Kai go ahead and at least finish his thought first, and then you can jump in.
Thank you, Sarah. I said I only use the example of the blood type to point out that you have information that isn't even necessary. There's a ton of information gathering that happens in hospitals. It's super important to know. The idea that your hypothetical here is the idea that a mother goes into labor, is rushed to a hospital, and then has her child, gets up and walks out before any information is put down about them. That's ridiculous. That's not how pregnancy works. That's not how childbirth works.
But that's not the problem.
No, the problem is that you believe that you would have no idea who she is, and you have no idea of knowing where the child is.
To get up Again, they can't produce their paperwork. They can't go home and get it. They say, sure, I'll go get my paperwork. And then they never return to the hospital. What then?
They can give a name. They can give if they are an American citizen, they'll give a social security number. If they're not, they would likely tell you that they're a visa holder.
I promise you that many people just do not know their social security numbers by heart.
Well, if they're not an American citizen, then we can scrap the social security number. If they're here on a visa, they'll say
that's a problem. We don't know if they're an American citizen.
Then in what situation would the mother simply decline to give information that could be used to identify her?
It could, but if they have a name like Jane Doe or something very common,
then you have a birthday.
To use that to
are people going to forget their birthday? Are people going to forget their birthday?
I don't think that a name and a birthday is sufficient.
In most cases, it is. You would be surprised that there are not billions of people who are all born on the same day with the same name. It is relatively easy to find. But hold on. That's just assuming they're American citizens, right? That's how we would have that information. And I think you would have it with the visa process too, because you'd have the name and you'd have their date of birth. So it would reasonably apply in all of those cases. So just give me an example, what real person would do what you're describing, not ever come back and have a child end up basically just I don't know, completely unidentifiable. In what situation would that ever happen in real life?
Sure. People do stupid things all the time, right? And people do make bad choices all the time. And people try to screw the system all the time. There's plenty of cases where they would not want to pay for their insurance or pay for the hospital bills. So they would probably skip town in a lot of ways, right? And they might be even citizens in that case, but they don't want to be tracked in how they pay. It just creates too many edge cases, and I don't think it's a good reason, or I haven't been provided a good reason to increase the bureaucracy in order to remove a load-bearing rule of birthright citizenship.
I think your
applied with good
estimation that
reason.
this is going to create just a class of individuals who are never identified in the U.S. system
It would
because
increase the
their
number.
mother ran
There would
off
be
after
more
giving
than
birth.
there is now.
I think it would be significantly less than the number of anchor babies and birth tourism that occurs. I'll say that
Allow me
much.
to interrupt for just a moment, gentlemen. You got about 15 more minutes left. So if there's any kind of last minute points you really want to drill in, now would be the time. And then we will send out the link for open panel and we'll get to the end of everything.
I do have important things that I want to ask.
Me too.
Okay.
But go ahead. I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I'll just say again, this kind of liberal fascism of you must subject yourself to the will of the state. The child serves the state and not his parents. I mean, you have argued that you would prefer that the child defer to the American nation, even if their parents are illegal immigrants. Does a child of illegal immigrants have a responsibility to turn their parents in?
No.
Why not?
I don't. Well,
it's against the U.S. interest to hide people who are illegally in the country.
Illegal immigration, being an illegal immigrant is a misdemeanor. I don't think that a child.
Hold on. But actually and intentionally hiding the fact that you are harboring them or that you know where they are, that is a felony.
Oh, hold on. Are you suggesting a child is harboring their parents?
No, but knowing specifically that people are illegal and not reporting it intentionally, that is a crime.
A minor has the same responsibilities as an adult. I don't think we should subject children to the same responsibilities that we subject adults to.
Like complete political allegiance to the United States.
A 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, someone who was just born, right, has any kind of responsibility to turn in their parents. That's absurd.
So when they're 18, do you think they should?
Do we have a moral obligation to help refugees?
I think it depends. I think it entirely depends. I don't think that it is tenable to help every refugee. I think it is morally good, but I don't think it is an obligation of the United States to help every refugee.
So I'm gonna read you a quote, and this is from Elder Patrick Kieran of the 70s.
Right before. Hold on. Right before.
Can I get my statement out without?
If you can answer my question, and then you can attempt to use my faith against me in this argument.
I'm not using your faith against me. I'm also of the faith, right? So
you're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yes, I served a mission. I went to. Well, I won't tell you where because
China.
But yeah,
Taiwan probably.
No. It was in the States. It's stateside.
But you were speaking Mandarin stateside,
right? Yeah.
That's so goated. I had a buddy who was called
I served a mission, right? All the things, all the things. I'm a little inactive now, but it is what it is, right?
We can fix that. We can fix that.
Yeah, we could. But so to be clear, I'm not using your faith against you.
Okay, that's good. My apologies for being presumptive. Admittedly, there are a few liberal debaters who are members of the church.
I'm not a Utah Mormon, as you can see with the Coke.
Oh no, Coke's fine. Dude, we drink so much Coke. We invented Swig. We invented Thirst, all the rest.
I'm fucking with, I'm messing with you, okay?
Good catch. Could you just add, just real quick, do you believe if a child turns 18 that they should have an obligation to turn in their parents if they're illegal? Because out of a duty to the American nation.
It depends on what they're doing that's illegal. I think that if you know that your parents are engaged in child trafficking, for example, I think you have a duty to turn them in. If your parents are
what if it's immigration fraud?
Speed right during rush hour or whatever. I don't think that matters. Like it's not an easy yes or no. To be clear.
Okay. Yeah, and then you can cite Elder Kieran.
So here's a quote: "Being a refugee may be a defining moment in the lives of those who are refugees, but being a refugee does not define them. This moment does not define them, but our response will help define us, because," and he quotes here, "Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen." Elder Patrick Kieran of the 70. This was a May General Conference, 2016. I don't know if it was Saturday or Sunday. I didn't write that down. But the point stands. I think that we have a moral duty to aid and provide succor to those who are in need. And we live in the promised land, man. I want as many people to come here as I possibly can get. And this is a moral question for me. This is why I wanted the legal questions interesting and fun, but I've had that debate. I've won that debate. It's an easy debate for me. But the more interesting question to me is a moral one. And I think morally, we just have this obligation, man. We can't shirk it. We can't excuse it. I think that we as a people, as a country, as a nation, should welcome these people in and give them the aid that we can. Does that mean that we should suddenly open all our borders and just let them pour in? No. But I think that
Why not?
removing birthright citizenship will hurt these children in a very real way. And I don't want to do that. So that's my kind of a closing pitch, if you will. Not a closing statement, but a closing pitch to you, to be like, come on, man, let's live by our standards.
Can I ask, what is the limiting principle? Why would you not welcome as many refugees as you can?
I think that at the point where it's providing, I'll give you a living principle, and I can't give you the exact line here, right? But at the point where it begins to negatively impact us so much that we are unable to care for our own, then we could probably have a different discussion. But I don't think we are anywhere near that point. And I think that we have an abundance of wealth, resources, and riches in America, even under Trump, that we can extend to others. And it will, to be clear, benefit us overall. I think it will be a net gain and a net good for our country.
Okay, I agree with your operating principle, which is that we have more of a responsibility to our immediate family, to our immediate nation, and the inhabitants thereof than we do to individuals outside of it. I agree with that, and I think that's a reasonable limiting principle that you've applied. I may disagree about how tenable it is to take in a certain amount or quantity of refugees, but I think we can find common ground on the idea that I do not wish for the United States to displace more people and then reject them. I think that we need to work hard not to continue displacing individuals across the world. And I think that's probably a more moral position to take as a world force and actor. My conclusion would basically be this. I think in every way, the policy, replacing our policy of jus soli with a principle of jus sanguinis is better. I think we understand that from the moment of an individual's birth, they have a citizenship that is a foreign one. Their immediate allegiance would likely follow, and I think very reasonably follows, from the allegiance of their parents. And I think there is no clearer case than in the case of the child of illegal immigrants. I think that the parents, although I don't wish the child should suffer for the actions of their parents, the parents begin on shaky ground when they do something that clearly violates a contract. And I don't think the United States should be reasonably expected to honor a contract and extend it to the children of an individual when the contract has been entered into on shaky ground, such as illegal entry. I do not like the fact that we are tasked in this country with a question of either undermining our current laws, which have removal proceedings as a reasonable consequence for illegal entry, or applying the laws and deporting people who are, citizens of the United States. The best way to remedy that moral quandary is by restricting mass migration, closing the border, and then applying a principle of jus sanguinis over one of jus soli. In that way, we cannot be said to be deporting American citizens. We also cannot be said to be undermining our laws just because individuals have gotten away with entering and avoiding detection for a longer amount of time. I think that is the most moral way of setting up our system. At the end of the day, I do not want to see families separated, but the current system makes that a very serious, complicated issue, and it's something that's perpetuated by the principle of jus soli or birthright citizenship. More than that, I think that it is very clear that throughout the course of history, when we've dealt with immigration, whether it is the birthright citizenship debates, whether it is, Ronald Reagan passing amnesty, whether it is the 1965 Hart-Celler Act, the American people have never once truly been asked if they want more migration. They've never been truly asked about that issue, and to the extent that they have, and to the extent that the Congress has attempted to argue one way or the other, it has always been to restrict. Nativism has been the trend, the national culture of the United States, and I do not believe that encouraging more people to come in and retain their national identities or change the national identity of the United States in such a way that reduces it purely to economics, I do not think that is positive. I think that nativism, pressure to assimilate, and then pressure to apply for citizenship once you're 18 is the best way that you preserve national identity, but also encourage participation in the United States and its systems. I don't think that it creates a bifurcated society. I think the bifurcated society is happening right now in the status quo. We're already seeing it in California, we already see it in New York, and we're seeing it now in Minnesota and even here in Utah. That's my argument against birthright citizenship. And I just want to take the opportunity now to do what I said I was going to do at the beginning and cite very specifically the actual
You're
debate.
going off, right? Can I get a word in edgewise?
Well,
here,
I thought this were closing statements.
It wasn't, but
Sorry,
I started to wonder. I was thinking, I was like,
does he think it is?
I was like, statement. That's okay.
Well, the way Wick closed, I thought that was his closing statement.
No. I was just letting you have. Okay, maybe.
Yeah, usually I apologize, Kai. Maybe me saying find your conclusion kind of points. That was probably my mistake. I apologize.
We can make it his closing statement then, as long as I get one, right?
Yeah, no, totally. We can do that. Kai, do you want to consider that your closing statement?
I think so. Yeah, I think I'll consider that my closing statement. At the end of the day, this issue has never been rooted in a hate of individuals, and I actually think that Wick's system is more immoral because it places the obligation that a child has to the American nation over the obligation that they have to their family. And I think that intuitively we don't ever see that to be the case. And I also think it's a little cruel to expect that of the child. And I think it's, the complaints that have been brought up, they seem to be so arbitrarily applied. There are hypotheticals of a woman, who has a child and then runs off and the child is, completely stateless. There are very arbitrary concerns about stateless individuals, despite the fact that Wick has repeated that he's not really concerned about the number of birth tourists or the number of anchor babies. And at the end of the day, Wick, although he will make arguments to the audience and to myself that might seem more consistent, doesn't actually seem to believe that those arguments that he provides rebuttals for are serious concerns, because when given the effort in his ideal world, he would do something that exacerbates the issue, like providing citizenship to the child of to the parents of a child who is born in the United States, although the parents are illegal immigrants. That would be my closing statement. And in the interim, while Wick closes, I'll attempt to find the quote here from the Congress. That way you guys all know that I've been thoroughly honest in representing the views of the Congress at the time.
Thank you so much, Kai. And I apologize for the confusion. And Wick, to you, please, sir.
Sure. So first of all, let me thank you for the debate. It was very spirited. I enjoyed it a lot. It was very fun to interact with you. I think that you have an interesting argumentative style that, as you admitted during it, is you're willing to mischaracterize what I say in order to make it more fun and interesting and lively, right? And that's great. And I appreciate you for admitting that. I think that at the end of the day, the core issues here are moral rather than legal, but the legal side is on my side. And I think that we're going to see that with the Supreme Court's ruling that's going to come up here in a month or two on the recent birthright citizenship case. I don't know if you listened to the arguments over there, but it was clear that almost all the judges were leaning towards ruling against Trump in this issue. And I think that again, the legal minds of our day are pretty clear that the birthright citizenship, as it's been applied in America for generations now, is upheld by the 14th Amendment. I think it's also clear that that's the case when you go back and you read the transcript of the debate itself. The people who were legislators at the time who were ratifying the 14th Amendment understood that this would be applying to all peoples except for very specific groups. Now, my opponent here has argued that they didn't understand, or perhaps they didn't can properly contend with the amount of people that might come in here, but I don't think that makes much of a difference in what their original intent actually was. I would posit that if we put this up to a direct vote to the people, that you would not change your argument if the people ruled against you. If the people decided that they wanted birthright citizenship and increased immigration, you would still oppose that on all the grounds and arguments that you have given during this debate. So appealing to that is simply to obfuscate what you actually believe and what you actually are advocating for and what you actually want. And I think that when it comes down to it, that we have a better nation when we have a culture that is accepting of a plurality of people from different religions, from different places, from different cultures, all under the umbrella of the larger American culture, which, as Reagan said in his speech, we are a city on a hill, a shining light in the darkness where anyone can come to and become an American citizen. And that's one of the things that has made our country great. And I want to see it continue to be so, because even though I have large problems with the current administration, that even then, we still live in the greatest nation on earth, and birthright citizenship has helped us maintain that status. We are better than the jus sanguinis only countries in Europe. I don't want to be Europe. I don't want to be Germany. I don't want to be France. I don't want to be any of these other countries. I want to be American. And I think that it is baked into our culture that we have birthright citizenship. It is understood. Everyone, it's baked into the cake. Finally, I think that morally, we should not punish a child for the sins of their father. And we can deal with all the problems with immigration, all the problems with asylum, all the problems with birth tourism in other ways. It does not impact them as much. I think that it is not healthy or not useful to the child to strip them of that right that we give at their birth, right? I think that would be doing them a disservice, and I don't want to do that. But thank you for hosting the debate, Sarah. Thank you, Kai, for coming and doing some rhetorical sparring. And yeah, it's been fun, and hopefully we can do it again sometime. There we go.
That was a swell debate. Thank you so much, Wick and Kai. To the audience, if you are interested in joining for open panel Q&A, I have been dropping the link to join the backstage into the live chat over here on the Raging Tomato. What we're going to do, gentlemen, is we're going to get through the super chats. And then we will bring up our panel so that they can join and ask you questions or make their commentary. And then, of course, we'll go into open floor because our audience over here has sponsored the goal all the way. So they get full gauntlet mode this evening. So congratulations. All right. And gentlemen, if you do want to drop that StreamYard link into your live chats, you're more than welcome to. We welcome all audiences from everywhere. All right. Shout out to Robert Paulson with the big 20. He says, this is because of Wick. Wick, are you sending love over here?
We are sending love over here.
Aw,
You gotta share the
sweet.
wealth. I love spreading the wealth. Okay.
Fair enough. Thank you so much. And of course, Spin City is coming in hot. He is backstage waiting, and I can already hear the arguments coming in. No more anchor babies, which he confirmed with his next message that says, no more anchor babies, period. We love you, Spin. I'm excited to have you on. Also, he sends in another 20 for credit and fuck your goal. Sorry, Kai.
It's okay.
Shout out to the chat. If you know the membership emoji, go ahead and hit it. But you guys did hit the goal, so congratulations to you all. Mr. Tom Carpenter is in for the night, but he sends in the big 50 on Cash App to say, I hope you have a great night. Thank you so much, Tom, and thank you so much for supporting our gauntlet mode per usual. Also, Iotin in the chat sending in love. She sends in the tomato tax with the big 10, adding to the goal. James asks a question, gentlemen. He says, how is not granting citizenship to children of illegal aliens considered a punishment? Sounds like an everyone gets a cookie argument. Wick, I believe that to you, is to you.
Certainly. Under the system that we have now, when a child is born in American soil, they are granted access to a host of benefits, a host of rights that we endow upon them. I think that by stripping that, we are taking something away that they are understood to have been granted and that we frankly should grant. To deny a child access to these things simply because their parents didn't have the right bloodline. That's crazy. I think that's a punishment.
Okay. Any thoughts from you, Kai, on that one?
No, I'm going to be honest. I'm still looking for another quote. I found the first one though, but yeah, I mean, I think Wick gets to this point again and again that a child has this right to be an American citizen, and I think that as we understand complete allegiance, which was also described in the original congressional debate, it seems very clear that that allegiance, especially of the child, reasonably follows that of the parents, and I think it is a little bit wrong. I think for a lot of the reasons that I lined out, I think you would create many issues if you believe that a child has an obligation to a nation that supersedes his obligation to his parents and their nation.
When a child is, well, let me just ask you this: when a child is in the hospital in Texas, right? Who's going to protect that child, right? Who's responsible to protect that child? When if
I think a person
hospital. Let me finish.
Oh, okay.
If terrorists come and take that hospital over, which country's military comes to save that child? Is it the government of their parents, or is it the U.S. government?
So if I move to another country, do I have a political allegiance to that country?
It's a simple question. I don't know why you're asking me another question.
Because it's to test the logic in an observably obvious way, which is, if I simply move as a child to another country, I'm not politically allegiant to that country.
No, I'm talking about when they are born. They are fresh out the womb, okay? They are sitting in the hospital little baby bed that they have, right?
Yes.
You've seen them on TV and shit like that.
Can I answer your question? Because I know what you're saying, and I have an answer.
Sit,
okay.
Right? Take over the things. It's not the country of the parents that save them.
Yes.
It's America that saves them. Therefore, they owe allegiance to us.
Yeah. And my response is that if I am on vacation in China and a Chinese police officer saves me, I don't think I'm allegiant to China. I think that allegiance must be complete. It must be total. Being subject to the jurisdiction of the United States must be total allegiance. It cannot be partial. It cannot be simply by protection. And that is one of the significant differences between the English common law, the nature of subjects, and what we have in the United States. Which is why I mentioned the other example. If I'm a child and I'm born in the United States but move the day, like let's say I can move the next day, I just cross a border over to Mexico or Canada, just because the Mexican or Canadian government is protecting me from a terrorist attack on that soil, does not make me completely allegiant to the Mexican or the Canadian government, unless you believe I should be.
I don't believe you should be.
Perfect. Then we agree.
But you do have some gratitude, I guess you should.
Oh, of course. I'm happily grateful. I'm very grateful for many countries in the world. I'm grateful they've had me as a tourist. It doesn't make me a citizen.
And just to be clear, the reason I'm giving you this example is because this is the example that's been used in case law in 1838 to showcase why a child would have allegiance to America. And you might disagree with the reasoning, and that's fair.
I do.
But that's the reasoning that we have established, and that was set out in law, right? And I believe
so now we are making appeal to law.
I believe it's sound reasoning. I believe it's good law.
Well, I think you disagreed with your own sound reasoning by agreeing that I did not have a responsibility to be allegiant to Canada or China.
Right? You're changing the circumstances.
Well, no, I'm testing the same principle, which is that if I should be allegiant, or if I am completely allegiant to a nation that protects me physically. But I don't think that's the case. I'm grateful, and you said, yes, you should be grateful. I agree with that. Yes. But grateful does not a citizen make.
That's true. But again, because you have, while you were on our soil and because you were born on our soil, you were under the protection of our laws, you do owe a certain allegiance. I
agree you owe a certain allegiance.
So, for example, if you were under the protection, hold on. Let me ask you this. If you were in Mexico, do you have a duty to obey Mexican laws?
You have a responsibility to, yeah, absolutely.
So then you agree with me that you have some form of allegiance to
100%.
Mexico while you were in Mexico.
100%. Yep.
Yes, great.
Wait.
Good. We're great. Then we agree on the principle.
We agree on the principle and disagree about whether or not that means that you should become a citizen or have a right to become a citizen by being responsible.
That's
for the
where
laws.
The disagreement is. Yes, that's true. But you agree on the principle that if you are subject to a nation's laws and you receive the protection of their laws, then you are, of course, owing at least some allegiance to that country as long as you are under the protection of those laws.
I don't understand how you don't realize that this kind of proves my point. which is that there is an
understand,
allegiance that is more important than the simple allegiance of protection, right? Or warranted by
your
by
argument,
being
as
protected.
I understand it, your argument, as I understand it, is that they owe a greater allegiance to the nation of their parents, and I don't see how that follows.
No. Hold on. This is complete versus partial allegiance. I believe you should have political allegiance to the United States. Political allegiance is not just the fact that you are protected by the United States' laws. It's the idea that just because you exist on some terrain and can be protected by a nation.
What is political allegiance to you?
Well, let me ask you this question: why are the children?
Why do you keep asking me questions
because this gets across my point. It's the Socratic method. Why do you believe the children of foreign ministers don't become American citizens, even though they are protected by the police in America if a crime is to occur?
Because foreign citizens or foreign diplomats aren't subject to our laws in a very real way.
But they're protected.
They do not have a duty to obey them. Like, we have diplomatic immunity as a concept for a reason. So when if they do break the law, a lot of times they would be like sent to their country to stand court and stand trial, but they won't stand trial here. We won't prosecute them. We won't be the ones that are holding them to account. They are not subject to our law. And it creates a messy political situation in that case. And so we understand that there are different factors that go into this specific thing that we were like, okay, so to kind of get out of the mess that this creates, we're going to just create an exclusion. So that's why they do that.
Okay. The very interesting thing is that I think if I applied your exact reasoning about, why should a child be punished for something their parents do? A child born to foreign ministers, by your logic, does have is protected in the same way by the American government if a terrorist attack were to occur.
Yes, it's a
born in U.S.
pragmatic
soil.
consideration. It's a pragmatic consideration because, unfortunately, the way politics works, we can't look. I would love to be completely moral all the time when it comes to politics, but I don't think we can.
Go ahead, Kai.
I think
finish your thought, and then we're actually going to move on to the next super.
Oh, sure.
I think it seems very logical to believe that a child, especially, I'm not saying only, but especially in the case of, being a child of a foreign diplomat, has an allegiance to a foreign nation extended to them through their parents. I think we reasonably assume that we can't expect the child of a foreign diplomat to be as American as the child of, American citizens that have been here forever, or of an American diplomat. And it is not the soil that changes it. It is the political persuasion and the duty of the parents. And I think if the parents have broken America's laws to enter the country, then we, in a similar way, have to extend some kind of, asterisk to the citizenship of the child, despite the fact the child has done no wrong.
Why wouldn't that apply to other laws as well? So say there is a couple that is like Bonnie and Clyding it up, and they are on the run from police, but they are American citizens, right? And
because then it takes into account
I forget which one is Bonnie and Clyde, but
it takes into account a different
woman
ethos.
goes into labor. Can I finish my hypothetical? The woman goes into labor, and they are suddenly
wait. Bonnie does Bonnie or Clyde go into labor?
Do they not get citizenship simply because they've broken the law? Does a child not get citizenship simply because their parents are in a state of law breaking?
Well, they already are citizens, though, so it's like they're already.
But they've broken the law. They've broken their allegiance. They have no allegiance.
Well, now you're treating two different issues. You're treating the issue of a political allegiance and an allegiance, or like an ability to subscribe to the Americas to American law. Here's the issue. What we're confusing here is the fact that the law that's been broken isn't just one of the United States' laws. It's a law specifically about gaining access to the country, and it is the breaking.
I don't see why that matters.
You don't see how the law. You don't see. Hold on.
You are in violation of our law.
You don't see how a law about immigration.
Law in general,
you don't see how a law about immigration might affect the result of the immigration.
No, I'm saying that if your principle is they broke this law,
that's not my principle. My principle is they broke immigration.
Well, let me go ahead and press us forward, and we can always save this for Gauntlet if we want. But I'll even add in Clyde in the terms of Bonnie and Clyde. Clyde is subject to the draft and can be pulled in, so he does have allegiance, and there is a duty and there is a responsibility there. If you're an illegal immigrant, then
moderation
you are
bias. I see how it is. Okay.
throwing the thought in there. All right. I saw the opportunity. I had to throw it in. All right. James, I love you, Wick, so much. Oh, goodness. I'm choking out. James says,
Don't choke.
a hypothetical U.S. born with parents from country X. United States declares war against country X. Child give aid and comfort to parents who are enemies of the U.S. Has the child committed treason?
The parents are not necessarily enemies of our country. When we declare war on Russia, we're not enemies of all Russians. All Russians are not our enemies. Their government is our enemy. So I think the framing of this question is just wrong. Like
FDR would beg to differ.
No, you would. So
no, FDR would.
Huh?
FDR would beg to differ.
Oh, well, FDR, I think that one of the biggest stains on the American legacy was what he did with the Japanese internment camps. That was horrific. And we did pay restitution, as we should have, to those people because we violated their civil liberties in a way that was just uncalled for. So, yes, FDR would disagree, but FDR was wrong, and I am correct. So.
All right. Any thoughts from you, Kai? And then we'll move to the next.
No, I mean, this is basically what I was describing, is that you have a serious conflict when you believe that the child has a more immediate allegiance to the United States than, their parents' home country. If, the parents, I mean, what about this? The parents of a foreign nation or who have citizenship in a foreign nation can reasonably be expected to be drafted in that nation. Like if...
so it's probably wouldn't want to deport them so we could prevent them from being drafted, right?
Well, no, you're saying that the United States has now a right to the allegiance of the individuals, despite the fact that they're not citizens, which is a huge problem. Like, if you want to talk about difficult legal questions, what right does the United States have to express nation if they are politically allegiant, which they are, to the foreign nation?
Like, I don't agree that a person necessarily has an obligation to serve their country if their country is in a state of what I would call unjust. Or
well, it doesn't have to look. It's not unjust. You're assuming it's unjust. What if it's a totally justified war? What if the United States aggressed?
Would they have a duty? Maybe, but I think they would have a bigger duty to their child to protect them. Would they not?
Yeah, but I think that's an interesting way of skirting.
Hold on. If their child is an American citizen, then it would be in America's interest to have them want to protect their child more, and therefore, I think that. Again, if my country's interest comes into conflict with another country's interest, I want my country's interest to win out.
You're right, but now you've taken your country's interest, you've put that on the child, and then you have retained the foreign interest in the parents. All you're saying is that you would want to include the parents, but that can't reasonably be done, right? If you have two parents who have a political allegiance to a foreign country, you can't just say, okay, well, you're Americans now. What if they don't want to be? What if they agree with the foreign nation? You're creating a situation where the parents still align against the United States, and they could be hold on, and the parents that's
what you're baking into the hypothetical. I don't think that's necessarily the case.
Go ahead, Kai,
and the parents in a time of war could be shut out, could be pushed out of the United States because they are now like foreign nationals residing in the United States. But the child is in a difficult predicament because you believe the child should be and must be completely allegiant to the United States, but that should conflict with the foreign nation that his parents are allegiant to. So you've created family conflict.
If we're at war with a foreign nation and we have national citizens of that nation within our borders, in my ideal world, they should renounce the allegiance that they have.
What if they don't?
Foreign nation. And that's the question. Well, what if they don't? What if a lot of things happen? But you're baking into the hypothetical that they will. And I don't think that's necessarily true, because one of the big strengths and draws of American culture in our setup and how we have it is that people flee to us. In the Cold War, we had, when the Berlin Wall fell down, which countries did they flee from? And which countries did they flee to? They fled away from the enemies of America towards the allies of America. And we still, yet even today, have one of the hugest draws where people want to be American. They come here because they want to participate in our system. And I think the strength of our culture is such that in a state of war, that these foreign nationals will want to help us rather than their home nation, because that's how strong American culture is and drawn American culture is. It's very possible that that's not the case, and that might happen, but you're baking into the hypothetical that it would or is more likely to, and I just disagree.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Iotin comes up with a big 10, says, I guess those babies should have planned better.
Pull them up by the bootstraps, those little baby bootstraps that they got, okay?
And she follows up to say, actually, I wanted to say there were two men here having a debate, and then women's pregnancy and labor got brought up, and neither of you thought to stop and say, hey, Sarah, you've had kids. Can you tell us about? I thought that was comical, but shout out to both of you for
Sarah,
not including me.
How was it after you gave birth? Did you run away?
No.
Were you like capable? You like just give birth and it's like, I gotta get out of here.
No, you're pretty miserable, and probably even worse for any of the mothers who had C-sections. I mean, I didn't have a C-section, but even at that, just regular style, and I was pretty burnt out. The last thing I wanted to do is move any body in my bone or bone in my body. But yeah.
What kind of information did you provide? Like how was that? Because this is interesting to ask. We should have asked this. What kind of information do you provide? How do you go about registering the child? Like, what questions are they asking you there after you've given birth? How's that process?
But you do the hospital, kind of like the hospital receipt. Like, this baby was born here, right? You can have a name if you want. Otherwise, it's Baby Smith or Baby whatever your last name is or whatever. But you get a baby receipt saying, I had a kid here. But then if you want to fill out like the Social Security and the name and all of that, you could take that paper home and actually send it in to for Social Security and getting the birth certificate, like live birth certificate, so on and so forth. You can send that in. Some people actually take it home and think about what name they want to give their baby, and they could take a couple weeks to do it. But as long as you have that hospital baby was born here receipt, like I got a baby receipt, as long as you have that, you can let it sit for as long as you want.
Simple, easy, works.
It works. Iotin says hospital staff generally do not ask for or verify immigration status unless they are helping the patient apply for emergency medical assistance from the internet. And I think that actually comes up later if you need billing and stuff. But if you're in labor and delivery, obviously the mother and the child are the priority. Delivering the baby is a priority, and the health of both of them are the priority. After that, then they come in looking for medical insurance, unless you're able to register and do that beforehand, then you can handle it. But Socrates says Wick just contradicted himself in 3 sentences. Let as many people in as want to come in. Also, that doesn't mean we should open our borders.
No, because that's not
Wick,
what I said. I said, we should have as many people as we can come in. And there's a fundamental difference between these statements. If I spoke as want, then I simply misspoke. Again, as many people as we can, because I think that benefits us. But if it comes to a point, and to be clear, I think we're very, very far from that point. If it comes to a point where it becomes an undue burden, then we can rethink this. But I don't think we're near there.
Okay. And shout out to Iotin, because she wanted her dono goal for the gauntlet mode hit. So she said to balance out the other 5 from Socrates. Shout out to you. Also, kind reminder, if you do want to jump backstage, now's the time to get back there. We're almost finishing with 8 questions. Hit the link that is in the live chat right now. Shout out to Jim, says to simp for Sarah. Thank you so much. I love it. And it is very welcomed here. Calvin says the Big Ten. Wick, how do you reconcile your view of extending citizenship strengths? Sorry, I apologize. How do you reconcile your view of extending citizenship strengthens country allegiance with the fact that some Palestine American voters,
Representative Tlaib.
Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Tlaib.
He's not a Republican, to be clear.
Withheld support from Kamala over Gaza in 2024.
So simply because it makes it more likely doesn't mean it's going to happen every time. And also, one could make the argument that withholding support from Kamala might be even in the interest of the country. I'm sure Kai here didn't withheld his support for Kamala. Does that mean that he was not putting his country first? I don't know if that's the case, right? Having a difference of opinion on how we deal with a foreign conflict does not necessarily mean, even though I know in a lot of arguments we use this as hyperbole, right? But having a difference of opinion on how to handle the Palestinian-Israeli conflict does not mean you are more or less allegiant to America. It simply does not. It's why you're doing so that might inform that. But no, I don't think that supporting Palestine or supporting Israel makes you more or less American. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think to divorce the reason for a vote from the consequence of the vote is just very dangerous. Obviously, people have this perception, right, of doing things that are better for the nation, but I think very frequently it's not just about the nation. I mean, you've had members of the state legislature in Minnesota who have talked specifically about how they want to use the United States to improve things in Somalia. This is something that politicians now do routinely, but voters do even more so. And this is a big problem with birthright citizenship. It's a problem I didn't even get into, but what it does is it creates an incentive structure for having more people here of foreign nations. And then it's a self-perpetuating cycle of those populations, as soon as they are old enough to vote, advocating for more immigration from people from their home countries, despite the fact that with their dollars, they are less allegiant than Americans because they send a third of their income back to their home countries, despite the fact that they are less allegiant to the national culture of the United States because they retain their national languages of their parents' nations for a longer amount of time than somebody who has lived here, who has had parents who have lived here and spoken English for centuries would. I think that is one of the most significant problems with birthright citizenship is it creates an incentive structure for advocating for policies on behalf of foreign nations and to perpetuate more people coming here without a concern for assimilation. And if assimilation were increasing, and if the pressure for assimilation were increasing, I would be less skeptical about it, but that doesn't seem to be the case. And there would be no reason for that ever to change if we allow more people in and give them citizenship by birth.
The problem with your framing here is it's just not true. A lot of the people who are heritage Americans, quote unquote, as they called, are the most communist mother frickers that you could ever see, right? Like my daddy, we're rebelling against mommy and daddy who have our money. Like look at people who are in the New England states, right? Who are rich, white, liberal women, right? They are obviously wearing their keffiyehs or whatever you call them, right? And they're this isn't I would take a immigrant who just came in, swore allegiance and an oath to our country, right? More than some commie or Hassan, right? Like Hassan Piker, who's an American citizen by birth, right? Who was born here. I don't think that like the bloodline or how long their family has been here really plays into the allegiance in a large way. And in fact, I would argue that many immigrants are very, again, allegiant to our country. And I'm talking about immigrants who are becoming citizens and on the path of becoming citizens and want to become citizens, right? They want to be here. They've chosen to be here. Now, this changes second, third generation, and then it reverses back, right? Like, so there's like a dip and a reverse back. But I think that like your characterization of this, I think is a little off base. I don't think it's true.
Any thought from you, Kai?
Yeah, I mean, it is tangibly the case that we have people advocating on behalf of nations that their parents or they have come from. This is just observably the case. This only increases with immigration. You would not have advocacy for foreign nations if the individuals advocating for them were not from foreign nations and were feeling if they were from foreign nations, felt a significant enough pressure to assimilate. And I think any kind of advocacy for the recognition, for instance, of a Mexican independence, say in the United States, is ridiculous. Unfortunately, that is only the case because we've entertained mass migration without a pressure to assimilate.
I disagree. Like, look at the LA riots back in
where the Mexican flag was being waved.
Yes, those weren't Mexicans waving that flag. They were white, liberal Californians, heritage American citizens. They weren't Mexicans. They were whiter than me. Okay, buddy. Right? Like the immigrants stayed away from there because they didn't want like ICE to get rid of them, right? They were not there. It's these liberal, these whites who've been here that feel invincible. They were the ones waving that flag in that case, right? Because they feel invincible. Oh, you're not going to deport me. I'm not indeportable.
I'm looking at a lot of people waving. This one is the. It is not. I think that's what is that, Cambodia? Yeah, seeing a lot of photos here of individuals waving foreign flags, and they don't look very white. They do not look like. I'm
They're
just saying.
American, and they've been American for a while, though. They weren't immigrants.
What does it mean to be an American?
Well, legally or culturally?
I think both. I think the problem is that we've reduced it to basically 9 digits, and that's a big problem of mine. Whatever the case is, I don't think you see these white liberals doing this kind of advocacy in the absence of mass migration from Mexico.
I disagree.
You think that if there were not Mexicans in California, there would be white liberals waving Mexican flags?
Hold on. Since Trump has, again, closed the border and cut off migration, and we have less migration now than we did before Trump, has advocacy for mass migration gone up or down?
It's decreased for sure. Under this admin, for sure.
It's obviously gone up because people are running away from Trump on immigration. You agreed with this earlier.
You
agreed that because of how he's handled it, they have ran away from him on this issue.
I don't think they've necessarily run away from reducing immigration. Like, I think that's probably it's shifted more to my side in the last 5 years than to your side. I do believe, however, that deportation is something that's very unpopular now because of the way it was executed.
I don't have the numbers on me, but I think that in the last year...
I mean, Donald Trump won the popular vote. You agree with that?
Well, of course.
And he campaigned on the largest deportation platform, campaigned on building a border wall.
Yes.
That wasn't a secret.
But then people have seen the result of that and what that looks like, and look, let's make a bet. How do you think the midterms are going to go for MAGA? If you had to guess.
The only thing that swayed me on this a little bit is now the way that redistricting has gone. But I'd say most likely we lose the House and we retain the Senate.
I think it's a coin flip on the Senate, but I think you guys are going to lose a House by about 20 to 30 seats.
I think 20 to 30 is crazy. I think we lose it by less than 10 because of the redistricting. If it weren't for that, I think it's closer to your number.
Sure. I think even with the redistricting, then you guys are still in a large problem. Like, the redistricting is going to hurt us in 2028. Right? But I don't think in 2026, I think your party is so unpopular. We look at all the special elections of all the seats that have been flipped. 30 have flipped from red to blue. 0 have flipped from blue to red. Right? And you guys have retained a couple of those, but we're in like a D+9 situation. And so a lot of these redistricting issues are in the year 2026 going to hurt you a lot, because in order to redistrict, you have to reduce the margins you win by, so you win in more districts, right? You have to dilute it. And I think that you're going to see what's called a dummy mander in a lot of these cases, right? Where they tried to gerrymander it so they would win more places, but because you reduce the margins, it's going to cause you to lose the seat. Now, 2028 might be a different beast because the political winds are often changing and shifting and things like that. So the redistricting is more of a play for a long-term issue in the Republican Party. But right now, under Trump's leadership, in the year of our Lord 2026, you guys are going to get thrashed, man. It's just true.
And let's go ahead and get our panel up here, and I'll save any other donors that come in and Q&As that come in for a little later. But are you guys ready to meet your panel?
Yeah. Oh, can I quote actually real fast? I want to read from the Congressional Globe. Like I said I was going to do earlier, but I'm making good on it.
Go ahead.
So this is the senator from California, Mr. Conness, and I can even throw it in. Actually, I will, just so people can read along if they care to. I'll throw it into your live chat, Sarah.
Can I get a drink real quick?
Go ahead.
No!
Go ahead. Yeah, you're good. Go ahead.
I've been sipping on that green. I've been sipping on that mate. I'm well hydrated. Throwing that in. Oh, I just got a. Hold on. Boom. There you go. There it is. There's the link. I'll wait for him to come back to read it. It is really fascinating. There's another quote that I recall reading it in somebody's article about it. They were pro birthright citizenship, but I can't find this article, and it's the one that includes specifically this quote regarding scores of individuals. I'll say, however, I wish I would have had this earlier, because it makes so clear, abundantly clear, what I was describing in a way that it's impossible. It is just totally impossible for Wick to run away from this idea that it is so obviously not the perception of the Congress that it was going to be applied or extended to millions of people. And it's actually really funny the way that they describe some of these different kind of ethnic enclaves. Let me make sure I have the right point. There's some funny one. I'll cite this part just for the chat because this is kind of funny. This is, I believe, from Senator Howard, who says, dude, he goes off. Sir, I trust I am as liberal as anybody toward the right of all people, but I'm unwilling on the part of my state to give up the right that she claims and that she may exercise and exercise before very long of expelling a certain number of people who invade her borders, who owe her no allegiance, who pretend to owe none, who recognize no authority in her government, who have a distinct independent government of their own, an imperium in imperio, who pay no taxes, who never perform military service, who do nothing in fact, which becomes the citizen, and perform none of the duties which devolve upon him, but on the other hand have no homes, pretend to own no land, live nowhere, settle as trespassers. This is I'm talking about the gypsies. He goes off. This guy goes crazy.
Yeah, he voted against it. I know this guy.
No,
right?
no. But this is what I'm about to say. So the liberal that replies to him, he kind of makes fun of him a little bit. I was citing that just because it's funny to read what he was saying. That guy went crazy. But Senator Conness here, he says, this is interesting. Describing the Chinese. He says, there are perhaps, here it starts. Now I will say, for the benefit of my friend, this is to assuage the fears of the representative or the senator we were just hearing from, Senator Howard, who was up in arms about the gypsies. He says, now I will say, for the benefit of my friend, this is the liberal senator, proponent of birthright citizenship, that he may know something about the Chinese in the future, that this portion of our population, namely the children of Mongolian parentage born in California, is very small indeed, and never promises to be large. Never promises to be large. We'll keep going. Says, notwithstanding our near neighborhood to the celestial land. The habits, celestial, whoa, this guy's Mormon? Jokes. The habits of these people, or of those people, and their religion appear to demand that they all return to their own country at some time or other, either alive or dead. There are perhaps in California today about 40,000 Chinese, from 40 to 45,000. Those persons return invariably, while others take their places. And as I have before observed, if they do not return alive, their bones are carefully gathered up and sent back to the flowery land. It is not an unusual circumstance that the clipper ships trading between San Francisco and China carry at a time 3,000 or 4,000 human remains of those Chinese. When entered in our state, they are not entered deep into the earth, but laid up very near the surface, and then mounds of earth are laid over them so that the process of disinterment, digging them up, is made very easy. That is their habit and custom, and as soon as they are fit for transmission to their own country, they are taken up with great regularity and sent there. None of their bones are allowed to remain. They will return then either living or dead. Another feature connected to them is that they do not bring their female to our country, but in very limited numbers, and rarely ever in connection with their families, so that their progeny in California is very small indeed. You know, the people who would be giving birth to the people that would be gaining birthright citizenship? From the description we have had of them from the honorable senator from Pennsylvania of the Gypsies, the progeny of all Mongolians in California is not so formidable in numbers as that of the Gypsies in Pennsylvania. It is only in exceptional cases that they have children in our state, and therefore the alarming aspect of the application of this provision to California or any other land to which the Chinese may come as immigrants is simply a fiction in the brain of the persons who deprecate it, and that alone. You want to know how many
Are you familiar
Chinese
with
there are in California?
Are you familiar with per capita?
Yeah, of course.
What are they by percentage? What's the number by percentage?
In California?
Yeah.
At the time, I don't know. I'd have to look up the population of California.
Okay, what is it now?
Well,
percentage, not the number, percentage.
The percentage of Chinese in California?
Mm-hmm.
I think it depends entirely on the place. If you look at a place like Orange County...
Look at the state of California. The state of California, what is the percentage of Chinese immigrants?
California's home, it's 4.2 to 4.8% of California's total population.
Okay, how much was it at the time? Was it more or less than that?
Then the percentage, I'd have to look up at the demographics in 1868.
That's my point. That
hold on,
matters.
Hold on.
Even if it's increased
Wait for me to look up the number before you make the argument.
You're trying to interrupt this point.
No, I'm trying to look up the number that you just asked me to look up. If you want to talk about per capita, you have to allow me to do the calculation. Like, don't try to skirt that point.
You don't.
Let me look up. Hold on.
Me talking isn't going then, but I don't think it's in significantly higher than then. And I think that we have a robust technological base to deal with that than we did back then. And so we have to take all these things into consideration. The idea that these founders did not, or not the founders, the ratifiers of the 14th Amendment may not have considered the growth of the nation to be as high as it is. I don't think that this factors into their intent in any real or meaningful way. But have you found those numbers? I'm very curious.
Let's go ahead and bring up the panel. They've been waiting patiently backstage, and I don't want to keep them hanging back there. All right, and everybody's going to go ahead and mute up their mics. We're going to go one at a time. And sorry, Kai, I hit the button before you jumped in, and it had a small delay, so I didn't get to stop it. But we're going to go one at a time, Q&A around the room. Everyone else, except for Wick, myself, and Kai, everyone else is going to stay muted up and respect everybody else's time during the Q&A portion. Our questions are meant to be respectful. Our comments are meant to be respectful and in the guise of the topic. Doc, I will kick it over to you. You are next in line, sir. Question or comment to either of the gentlemen.
Yeah, great debate, guys. Thanks so much. Kai, you demonstrated every single trait of sociopathy over the course of the debate. Yeah, human reaction, right? Yeah, but anyways, I wanted to know this. So so I have an argument for you. Are you okay entertaining a short argument? It'll take 2 minutes, less than 2 minutes.
Of course, absolutely.
Okay.
Wait, can I ask though, if I may, I am interested in hearing like what the case for my sociopathy is.
Just watch your facial expressions and stuff after the debate. Yeah, just observe yourself.
Then I like smile
but anyways,
a lot.
It's something like that, right? So anyways, let's get into it. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, exactly. Puppy dog face. Ooh woo. So anyways.
Okay, let's go. I'm ready. Yeah.
It's not like that, right?
I don't think you have human emotions. Like, I mean, you're speaking in a monotone voice. What am I supposed to call you a sociopath now?
That's fair.
Go for it. Yeah, call me a sociopath.
Why would I do that? I think that's a very loaded term.
I don't know.
Kai, allow me to introduce you to Duck. There's a reason why Duck has a few membership emojis of no Duck and the kazoo and all of those things because of his times here on the panel. And yes, if you're a member, go ahead, drop those emojis now. Go ahead, Duck. Get to your question.
Okay, so citizenship wasn't spoken about robustly in the Federalists. It's referenced in Federalist 1 and 10 most robustly, and then Federalist 78, right? I know you've read this prior to the debate. Federalist 78 provides that delineation of when the executive or the legislature may rule on this. And so if we look at the actual history then, so if we're saying, well, let's go to the history, how do you account for the fact that citizenship and naturalization was never like it was never behind some like iron curtain or whatever you want to say, right? It used to be that you could file a declaration of intent at a local or municipal court or a federal court, any of them. There was no standardized form. And this was the case until 1906. And then once they standardized the form from 1906 to 1952, a form that collected no information, by the way, and this process ran until 1952. And then what happens, Kai? In 1952, after it was like the Immigration and Naturalization Act or something like this, right? Whatever it was called, because you read through this stuff, it's not, it's not Turning Point articles, it's not Breitbart. But after this, the laws for citizenship actually extend back to the level of family, and it extends to break down racial barriers of citizenship. This is what the purpose of that act in 1952 was. After the Cold War, the modern era of the modern industrialized service economy United States. And so I'm curious, given the abundance of historical evidence and lack of evidence in jurisprudence and constitutional law, how you would make the case to people living in the United States and who birthright citizenship might affect, that your hate-based beliefs, your narcissism, and your misunderstanding is the reason they have to engage in this pointless political discussion. I don't know what you're smiling about. I don't know what you're smiling about. What's funny?
Because he's a puppy dog uwu.
Yeah, I think it might be my puppy dog.
Start a Fansly. Start a fucking OnlyFans.
Well, let's not say the F word. Let's not say the F word.
Hold on. Pardon me for just a moment.
Let's not say the F word,
Now,
Doc.
hold on,
Let's calm down.
Fuck you, Kai.
Hey,
hold
fuck
on,
you.
Doc,
let's not say the F word,
Doc.
Doc. Come
Fuck
on,
you,
Doc.
bitch.
Come
Hold
on. Let's
on,
not say the
pardon
F
me.
word.
Pardon me for just a moment. Doc, now you came in swinging, okay? Kai hasn't done anything wrong to you. He hasn't touched you. He hasn't hurt you. He hasn't said anything to you that's mean. You came in swinging. Now chill it out, okay?
I appreciate the recommendation of an alternative.
I didn't ask you to appreciate anything.
Hold on, Doc.
Respond to the argument, bitch.
Doc, relax. Let
What's
him
funny about that?
respond.
This is a gem.
Kai, do you appreciate our debate more now?
Okay, we'll
Dude,
just put you backstage.
I love the debate.
Kai, you are
do you
welcome to
appreciate our debate a little more
respond.
now?
A W crash out. This was a W crash
Hold
out.
on.
I'm rocking
I
with it.
guess we both got crashed out on, like
Yeah.
one after another. It was crazy.
Kai, you are welcome to respond to it if you so choose. If not, I can move on to the next person. Doc needs to take a little time out.
Yeah, I mean, what he's saying is absolutely correct. I frame this within the way that immigration has developed over time. There's a lack of jurisprudence on a lot of issues in the U.S.'s history. It's because a lot of times we take stuff for granted. So what I tried to establish is that there was certainly over time, the most consistent thing that we can see is a pressure to assimilate. There is a pressure of nativism. I don't think Duck would disagree with me there. The pressure to like assimilate has been one of the most consistent trends. And that's not me saying I think that the abuse of immigrants is a good thing. But the fact that you have the counter pressure of telling people, hey, you really need to speak English, and that acts as a control, kind of pushing some people back to their home countries if they don't assimilate fast enough. The Italians are a good example of this. A third of Italians that immigrated early in the United States' history returned back to their home country because I think they were one of the toughest groups to assimilate. I think it shows that over time we adjust things as the scale of immigration changes and as it begins to warp and shift the American identity. So I think it's, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with a lot of what Duck said. I appreciate that he assumed I'd read through all of those different Federalist papers. I haven't read Federalist 76. I appreciate the recommendation. I will do so at the conclusion of the debate. But what I'm arguing for now is an authentically new response to something that is an authentically new problem, which is mass migration and a specific lack of jurisprudence, for instance, on the issue of whether or not children of illegal immigrants should have birthright citizenship. That's something that hasn't been adjudicated either in his favor or in my favor. It's something that the Congress could step in and clearly define. And that's what I think it should do. That's why I'm in favor of the repeal, and I think that there are a lot of reasons that I articulated that would make jus sanguinis a better policy going forward to mitigate the effects of mass migration to the United States. And I think, actually, to Wick's original point, it would probably improve the way that we consider nationality and citizenship. It would probably make it more serious, and it would cause us to look at it as something more than just kind of this frivolous application of, whoever has a social security number. Because there are plenty of people who have social security numbers who aren't even citizens. I mean, people don't often recognize that, but it's like, you could have a social security number and not be an American citizen either. So I would say we just follow the rest of the Western world and realize that, okay, now's the time that we start, being a little bit more selective as to who is extended the right of citizenship.